My British Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, Windsor Castle. Seeing Edward's determined face, the young guard hesitated to speak, and could only protect Edward and leave. It seemed that the movement of leaving was a little louder, and the pretty little girl who was playing at the side raised her head and watched Edward and his party in expensive clothes leave slowly, with a hint of doubt in her dark blue eyes. "Miss, that seems to be Our Majesty the King." An older girl at the side followed her lady's eyes and said softly, "Oh, really? Then let's go too," the little girl said with a cute smile as she rolled her beautiful eyes. Then, with a puppy in his arms, accompanied by several maids, he also left slowly. The reason why Edward didn't go up to say hello was mainly because when he was about to go, he suddenly remembered something was wrong during the period when the Baron's mansion reported the banquet. How did the Baroness go to play? And it happened to be on the way he was walking, which did have a sense of conspiracy. Don't overestimate the integrity of the nobles, especially the current nobles. What's wrong with a daughter who becomes the king's mistress? At least it can bring great benefits to the family. When some people think of Britain, they think of gentlemanly demeanor. In fact, in Europe and England at present, shamelessness and shamelessness are the necessary conditions for doing well. Gentlemen are still a class at this time, a collective term that includes nobles, knights, yeomanins, and local squires. It was not until the 18th and 19th centuries that, in order to better reflect the status of the boss of the United Kingdom, gentlemen really became a kind of culture. For example, courtesy, humility, not showing off wealth, not pretending to be aggressive, neat clothes, etc. That is, gentlemanly demeanor. Edward suspected that this was a conspiracy set up by the Baron, so he watched it for a while and then left. What's more, his physical equipment is not yet fully mature. Let's talk about it in a few years. Besides, we can meet each other often, Your Excellency the Baron. I am very satisfied with your arrangement," Edward said to the robust Baron with a gentle smile in his eyes. "It is an honor for our whole family to serve you," the Baron said, flattered, with a hint of excitement in his eyes. "Very well, for a noble talent like you, being idle at home is the biggest loss to England. Therefore, I have decided to appoint and dismiss you as Minister of the Privy Council." Edward's expression was serious, as if he was thinking of the country. "This is really an unforgettable decision, My Majesty." The Baron was stunned by the pie all of a sudden, and he looked extremely excited. "Well, Your Excellency the Baron, I hope you can make outstanding contributions to England," Edward said encouragingly. After that, Edward went back to rest, leaving only Baron Brant, who had a happy night. The next day, Edward led the entire army back on the journey. When he arrived at Windsor Castle, except for hundreds of guards brought by Edward, the other Scottish nobles and guards all returned to London. A huge and gorgeous carriage with the emblem of red and white roses slowly stopped at Windsor Castle. A group of manor stewards under Windsor Castle and nearby knights stood respectfully at the door, bowing their heads to greet His Majesty the King is coming. "Congratulations, Your Majesty." All the stewards and knights bent their waists at a 30-degree angle, with their right hands touching their chests, their faces respectful. After that, Edward came out of the carriage, and after that, the mature and plump Queen Mother Mary came out with little Lolita, followed by the two maids, Luna and Lucy. As soon as Edward came out, everyone slowly straightened up, but lowered their heads slightly to show respect. Edward nodded lightly, then led the way into Windsor Castle, followed by many knights and stewards, but Queen Mary and little Lolita, led by the maid, came to their own room and drove for several days. As tired, Edward has not been to Edinburgh for a long time, so first he chatted with the knights for a while to understand the situation of the people, so that he can make timely policy adjustments. The reform of the central government and the judicial reform have indeed brought some troubles to the local government, especially the change from the original flat judicial management model to the pyramid model, from the original equality to the current vertical management, which made local courts very resistant, especially those judges. They are basically gentlemen in the local county, they are very powerful in the county, and they don't care about London's arrangements for such a situation. Those judges in London who have tasted the taste of power will certainly not give in. All judges who resisted will be dismissed, and then his deadly opponents will be supported as judges from the county, and they will be dealt with separately. This method is extremely effective. For the sake of rights, the newly appointed judges will of course choose to support London's decision, while the dismissed judges oppose the newly appointed judges. In this way, The local forces have achieved the effect of disintegration. Edward expressed satisfaction with the performance of the justices of the royal court, and the annual salary of several £1,000s is not white hair. After the knights finished speaking, they also retreated consciously. Next, Edward chatted with his stewards about the land reform of the royal estate. Your Majesty, we don't know about other places, but the manor we manage uses your Majesty's 3-field system and that iron plough, and after irrigation with dung, not only have I reclaimed 200 acres of land, but also black the yield of wheat per mule has reached 25 bushels, about 1,800 caddies, almost doubled. The housekeeper was surprised by the numbers now, with a look of exclamation on his face, and his eyes were full of admiration for Edward, but Edward felt a little dissatisfied. Calculated according to the fact that 1 acre equals 6 mu, the yield per mu is only about 300 caddies. This is only the level of the low-grade fields in the Ming dynasty, far below his expectations. The other manor housekeepers also spoke one after another, constantly praising Edward, as if he was really the son of God. Blushing when he said it, Edward listened carefully. The 13 manors have a total of 8,600 acres of arable land. According to 1,800 caddies per acre, that is 15,480,000 caddies, or almost £1,404,000. Calculated at 2 pence per pound, the profit was only about £10,000. There is also precious wheat. Even so, it is only £20,000 a year, which is too far from doing business. Edward sighed silently in his heart, but still had a happy look on his face, and expressed that he would reward them. Many housekeepers hurriedly bowed to express their thanks, and the expressions on their faces became more excited afterwards. Edward asked how the secrecy work was done, and the housekeepers all patted their chests and said that there was no problem at all, and the serfs didn't have the courage to speak out. Chapter 177. It in number 039, time to collect taxes. After inspecting these manors, Edward took little Lolita and his party back to London. After returning this time, the London city government started preparations early in the morning, and the entire street was cleaned again. Members of the London city government and the Privy Council ministers all came outside London to welcome His Majesty Edward. This grand ceremony was held by the unanimous decision of the Privy Council. One is to welcome the return of His Majesty the King, and the other is to celebrate Scotland being officially conquered by England. The establishment of the United Kingdom of Scotland and England is coming soon. This joyous atmosphere also brought the people of London, citizens, nobles and rich people celebrated this rare prosperity for hundreds of years, and sales of various wines and commodities were booming, and the poor and beggars at the bottom, although they don't understand why or what is a national event, they are also very happy because many nobles and merchants were generous once in a while and began to give bread, so they also rejoiced along with the whole city. From this point, it can be seen that England is different from most countries in Europe. At the beginning, the English people have initially awakened their national consciousness. The religious reform not only brought huge financial income to the Tudor royal family, but also allowed the rise of the bourgeoisie. More importantly, it loosened the shackles on the minds of the English people, allowing businessmen and nobles throughout England, as well as some commoners, to begin to identify with and be proud of this country. It is still the Tudor royal family that plays a representative role. Unlike the previous royal family, the Tudor royal family fully recognizes themselves as the King of England, instead of thinking of themselves as the King of France as before. The King of England is just a crown that is forced by the situation. Beginning with Henry VIII, the Tudor royal family began to manage England, from setting up sheriffs, 100 household districts, and encouraging commercial development, and suppressing the enclosure movement. The efforts of the Tudor royal family have also yielded results. The English nation began to be born, the national consciousness was awakened, and they recognized the king as the representative of the English nation. Therefore, after Princess Mary came to the throne, the fact that he married the Spanish king was so unacceptable to the English. They could not accept that a man who did not belong to England became the King of England, and this is also an important reason why Elizabeth I did not get married later. She chose rights and gave up marriage, just the opposite of her sister. This is also the key to her being loved by the English. The streets are full of energetic boys and girls, jumping children, hawkers, troubadours who play and sing, and jugglers. It's a lively scene. Edward, however, did not start patrolling London as stipulated after everyone welcomed him. Instead, he lay on the bed and began to fall asleep soundly. I didn't wake up in a daze until I slept until night, and ate a hot and freshly cooked dinner. Braving up his spirits, Edward began to meet the Privy Councillors in London. This time, Ferrus Alexander, the Dean of the Privy Council, came to report the specific situation to Edward. Your Majesty, Since you set off for Scotland, the central government's reforms have been adjusted. According to your reform content, all departments and personnel have been basically replenished, but, facing Edward, Alexander, the first president of the Privy Council, began to hesitantly speak, and Edward couldn't help but feel puzzled. What's wrong? Your Excellency the Dean, Your Majesty, it's just that there is not much money left in the treasury. Alexander was a little embarrassed, and his head began to hang down. Didn't I leave £10,000 when I went to Scotland? Why did I spend it so quickly? Edward was speechless at this speed of spending money. In less than a month, £10,000 were gone, but you must know it only cost him £10,000 a month to support 3,000 guards. How did the Privy Council spend it all? For the matter of spending money, Ferris Alexander has every reason to support it, and then he took the time to explain one by one. Your Majesty, since your reform, due to the expansion of a large number of central manpower, you have taken the initiative to pay the salary. As he spoke, Alexander began to complain, with an expression on his face that you were taken advantage of. My heart was churning. How good it was in the past. You served me, I gave you rights, and from time to time, the king rewarded you with some money for a good job, and it was good to sit in the house at that time. Those who could become members of the royal family were either local nobles or monks. Few of them were short of money, and all they cared about were rights. Besides, after taking away the rights, are you still afraid of running out of money? Therefore, in the Middle Ages, it is a tradition to be greedy even if you are greedy, and the king will not condemn you for it now. There are hundreds of people in the court, with a monthly salary of £1,500, plus more than 400 people from various departments of the Privy Council, whose salary is more than £5,000, plus 3 from the Navy. Thousands of pounds, plus the annulment and consolidation of some small courts. The £10,000 you gave will be gone in half a month. As for money, Alexander came here casually. After all, he had worked as the Minister of Finance, so he was familiar with this. Looking at the helpless president of the Privy Council, Edward couldn't help feeling sorry for him. I was very happy when I co-authored the reform, but the labor pain afterwards was so uncomfortable. Originally, the entire central government could not spend much money in a year. All the expenditures of the entire country, except for the enjoyment of the king, are wars, and wars are currently the largest expenditure of the government. However, if you want to centralize power, you must establish a bureaucracy throughout England, so that the rule can be stabilized, the power of the entire country can be quickly concentrated, and in order to have greater war potential. However, if local reforms continue, the annual salaries paid to bureaucrats will be a large number, and Edward can't afford it now. Without reform, Edward's ideal of conquering France, defeating Spain, and dominating Europe will be delayed for decades. Therefore, if Edward wants to get out of the predicament at present, there is only one word: money. And relying solely on the royal family's income, it is impossible to continue to support the reform. Besides, he is not willing to take his money all the time. For the current plan, only taxes can be collected, and it is time for the Parliament to open for a while. At this time, the Parliament did not meet frequently like it does now, and only the king can convene the Parliament. Therefore, the parliamentarians spent most of their time resting at home, and the king would call them when he had something to do. During Henry VIII's period of ruling England for decades, only 7 parliaments were held, and Henry VIII only 13 times. Your Excellency Alexander, I think it's time to collect taxes. Thinking of this, Edward stood up and said solemnly. Chapter 178 Tax Approval of Parliament. Facing Edward's sudden words, Ferris Alexander calmly glanced at the young king in front of him. As expected, after following Henry VIII for so many years, when the king mentioned that he had no money, the first thing he thought of was taxation, and he was used to it in England. The king has no money, so he can only propose taxation to the Parliament, and the Parliament will agree in due course according to the king's situation at this time. You should pay attention that the taxation opened by the Parliament is one time, that is to say, after the tax is collected, the king has no right to collect taxes. Therefore, part of the current income that Edward can get is the royal family's land, and the king's exclusive tax tariff, plus the tithe collected by the royal court after the religious reform. It can be said that businessmen at this time do not need to pay taxes in normal times except for tariffs, let alone agricultural taxes. And what if the king has no money? One is forced payment, and the other is to seek help from the Parliament. Forced payment, as the name suggests, means that the king forcibly borrows from those merchants and wealthy nobles. After lending money to the king in this way, you are ready to be gone forever. Don't think that the king will return it to you. Of course, The king will return it to you when most of the money is abundant. But what if the king really ran out of money and couldn't repay the loan? At this time, the benefits of the king's control of the parliament came. For example, Henry VIII, he fought wars all year round, and the income from the religious reform was not enough for him to fight, and he owed a large amount of loans at this time. Henry VIII asked the parliament to meet and pass a resolution to cancel part of the debt owed by the king, which is usually the majority of the debt. This is very shameless. The passage of this resolution by the parliament means that the country has cancelled most of the loans for the king in the form of law. The second is to convene the next parliament, let the members pass a resolution, agree to the king's tax collection, and allow the king to collect a tax in the name of compensation. The compensation includes 10 tax 1 and 15 tax 1. The 10 tax 1 and 15 tax 1 were originally the tax rates on urban and rural real estate and land property, 1/10 of the real estate value of urban property owners, and 1/15 of the land value of rural landowners. When it came to Henry VIII, this amount of money was not enough for his teeth, so at his request, the scope of taxation of the subsidy continued to expand. When it came to Edward, in addition to the traditional 1/5 tax and 1/10 tax, taxes were also collected on commodities, agricultural products, production and living facilities, livestock, rent, annuities, daily necessities, salaries, etc. in cities and rural areas. Those who stick to money are all within the scope of his taxation. After one tax is levied, if the tax amount is not enough for the king to repay the loan, then the second tax will continue to be levied. If these taxes are not enough, the king will impose new taxes, such as poll tax, with the approval of parliament. However, if the king wants to bypass the parliament to collect taxes, it will attract opposition from the people of the whole country, and it will end in failure. For example, in 1525 and 1546, Henry VIII planned to bypass the parliament twice and collect taxes directly, but was opposed by the people of the whole country and failed. And if Edward directly convenes the parliament to collect taxes, it means that Edward recognizes the taxation power of the parliament, and the parliament will generally approve it later. Charles I had no money to suppress the Scottish rebellion, but he did not agree with the conditions of the parliament, so he taxed himself, which led to the unanimous opposition of the national gentry group and noble citizens. This is the origin of the fuse of the British Revolution, Your Majesty. This method is feasible and can alleviate the central government's financial gap. Ferris nodded quickly and agreed. This is the best way, just like our parents who lack money, and the king who lacks money to find parliament. It has become a common practice. As for the taxation, Ferris, as the Privy Council minister, of course agreed in every possible way, but Edward felt a little uncomfortable in front of the parliament. The king is the master of the parliament in normal times. Let the parliament go east, and the parliament dare not go west. When it came time to collect taxes, the king had to bow his head and discuss with the parliament on an equal footing. Although the parliament would eventually agree, such arrogant kings felt uncomfortable. Therefore, for hundreds of years, the British royal family has been pursuing financial self-sufficiency, so that they can support themselves. However, until the Tudor dynasty, Henry VIII began to realize it, and when it came to Henry VIII, the war madman, the finances have never been self-sufficient. The parliament has not been held for 2 years. Edward thought for a while and asked casually, "Yes." Ferris said after thinking about it, bending over. Parliament has not convened again since Duke Edward introduced the Reformation Act the year before last. Then you can arrange it. Edward sighed and said in a calm tone, "Yes." Ferris nodded slightly. After that, the room became quiet, and the little maid quietly lit the candle. The shadow of the candle was shining brightly, and the moon outside the window had already climbed into the air, reflecting the figure of the young king in thought. Ferris also consciously exited the room and began to arrange for the convening of the parliament. The English parliament is made up of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The House of Lords is made up of nobles and monks and is appointed by the king. The House of Commons is composed of knights and citizens, and is democratically elected. Each county can send 2 knights, and each big city can send 2 citizens. Parliament has 3 major powers: promulgating laws, approving taxation, and dealing with major political events, such as the divorce of Henry VIII, which was a big deal. Members of Parliament are not stationed in London for a long time. They will come to London to perform their duties only when the king convenes Parliament. Therefore, Ferris needs to call them one by one and let them come to London at this time. The charming moon sprinkled silver moonlight from the sky, covering the blood-shrouded city of Francisco, with a special sense of beauty. After a few days of recuperation, Major James took His Excellency Kyle Lands, the Minister of the Privy Council, to board the Sea Monarch and dozens of ships that could move behind, and came to France's bustling port on the west coast, Francisco. After a few days of showing off, Major James finally found out that there were no extra ships in this port city to stop them. And there were very few troops defending the city. This was a golden opportunity. Of course, Major James could not forget His Majesty's order, and decisively started the attack at night. It would be fine if it was another city, but it's a pity that it's a port city. The navy of more than 1,000 people broke down the city defenders who had been frightened for several days. In less than 3 hours, the English had already taken control of the city. This prosperous port city. Chapter 179. Blackmail the whole city. At this time, after fighting for most of the night, the entire city has set up the flag of England. The formerly bustling and prosperous city now presents a deathly silence. Every household has closed their doors and windows, and the blood-colored night does not see any human beings on the streets. But the street that was so full of mud and rubbish is now dyed in a bewitching red, with mutilated body parts randomly placed on the street, and English soldiers with blood on their faces holding various weapons, groping one by one. Various corpses, hoping to get some finances. Lieutenant Commander James Leo Shettley and Privy Council Minister Kyle Lance walked on the street full of dead bodies without any hesitation, turning a blind eye to the soldiers groping for dead bodies. The patrol soldiers who passed by the two from time to time also looked curiously at the two walking in the middle of the night, casting doubtful eyes. James and Minister Kyle walked side by side, talking and laughing. Lord Lance, how many gold coins do you think this city can collect? Pointing at the shops in front of him, he didn't need to think about how prosperous it was usually, and the flow of gold coins was almost like a river. Thinking of this, Major James salivated. His eyes were full of greed, and he looked at everything in front of him. Wantonly caught off guard, Minister Kyle, who had been discussing the Los issue, was a little stunned for a while, then shook his head. His dark blue eyes rolled, thought for a while, and said, "Mr. Major, according to my estimate, the city of Francisco can almost receive tens of thousands of pounds in taxes every month. After deducting the payment to the King of France and various expenses, the monthly surplus is about £3,000. Really? This is really a huge sum of money. Sure enough, this is a very rich city." Hearing the minister's explanation, Major James almost swallowed his tongue. Although he was speaking, Major James still saw a corpse lying in a pool of blood in front of him, and stepped over it with a light kick. If that's the case, then we've gained a lot from this trip. Yes. Tomorrow I will go to Paris to meet King Henry VIII of France. I think his face may have turned black into coals, and it is pleasant to think about it. Laughing, Kyle's two beards moved. It looks very happy. Yes. Your Excellency, I wish you a smooth tomorrow and complete the tasks assigned by His Majesty. Following a few laughs, Major James stopped and blessed him. This is an extremely simple task. I can't wait to see Henry VIII's depressed look. After laughing a few times, Kyle Lance walked around with Major James, and then went back to rest. He has to hurry tomorrow, so it is important to hurry up and rest. Major James, on the other hand, tirelessly walked around, also known as patrolling. The entire city was basically in a calm state, and the resistance was completely wiped out. The next day, Kyle Lance, who barely rested for a few hours, got up in a hurry, took a few guards and servants, and hurried to Paris in a carriage. And after Major James got up early to say goodbye to Kyle Lance, he didn't go back to sleep again, and started to patrol the troops. Due to the repeated orders before the siege and the fact that the siege soldiers did not suffer much damage, the English army at this time was like a model army for later generations, and did not commit any crimes except for the 500 patrol soldiers arranged by James in the city overnight. The rest of the soldiers were arranged to guard the prisoners in the barracks in the city, and the soldiers who hadn't slept all night were also very emotional. The defeated soldiers and captured captives, plus the dead defenders, were looted by the English soldiers over and over again, and even their clothes were stripped as a result. The dead were thrown out into the sea by the soldiers, and the prisoners were exposed to the cool wind all over their bodies, leaving only a piece of linen underwear to cover them up. When Major James came to the barracks, the soldiers counted their trophies with red eyes, and some even fought over a silver coin under the escort of the guards. Major James came to this smoky barracks, feeling a little bad all over. Go and call them all, including the patrolling ones, except for the gatekeepers. Major James said softly to the guard next to him with his neck tilted, watching the sluggish guards leave. Major James coughed and said sharply, "Look at what you look like. You are making a lot of noise over something, and you haven't assembled yet." The fighting soldiers finally found out that their chief was coming, and quickly stood up, standing together in the order of the ship. So, when everyone arrived, James saw a queue of more than 30 teams looking at these soldiers with blood on their clothes but high morale. James nodded in satisfaction. Guys, last night's harvest was just a snack before the big meal. Today I will make everyone's harvest even richer. Major James' words aroused the active genes in the soldiers, and suddenly, the atmosphere in the barracks seemed even more heated. Major James smiled, as he had expected. Today, you have given you a task to knock on the door of someone who looks rich. If he is a merchant or aristocrat, then you need to ask them to pay a ransom of 100 gold coins. If you knock on the door of ordinary people, you only need to ask them to pay 10 silver coins. Don't take too much, don't rob, don't harass other women. After taking the money, you need to explain that it was given to you by the King of France. Remember the last sentence. Major James shouted. Got it. The soldiers shouted. Hand over all the money to me. I'm on the 7th floor, and you're on the 3rd floor. Don't try to hide it from me. I will send someone to monitor it. In the end, Major James's words were warning. After that, the soldiers formed groups of 3 or 5, and together they began to blackmail the whole city. Boom, boom, boom. Picking up the spear in his hand, the soldier hurriedly knocked on the door of an ordinary house. The hostess, and children huddled together, trembling with fear. Seeing that the door couldn't be opened, the soldier violently opened the door in a fit of anger. He came to the room and looked at the trembling family and said, "Hurry up and take out 10 silver coins. I have something urgent and I don't have time to waste." Since the city of Francisco is not far from England, on the brink of the English Channel, and is still located in Normandy, English is very familiar to them. The man stood up tremblingly, took out a box containing money, walked slowly to the soldier, and put it in his hand. The soldier glanced at it and took away the 10 silver coins. After that, he returned the box to the man and walked out quickly. The man breathed a sigh of relief, but the soldier came back and said, "This is what the King of France told us to take." After that, the stunned family was left behind and left directly, and today, the entire city is filled with violent knocking on doors. Chapter 180. Seymour. This night was both painful and happy for the residents living in Francisco City. The pain is that a lot of property has been lost in my family, and some people can only use jewelry as mortgages if they don't have enough money. Fortunately, this group of English people did not plunder like ordinary troops in this era, and no one has any money. Life is in danger, and the English soldiers who robbed suddenly left a sentence after the looting. "This is what the King of France asked us to take." This made the citizens puzzled. They directly thought that this was the meaning of Henry II in Paris, but they did not expect that this was an order from Edward VI, who was in London at this time and had the title of King of France in name. Overnight, the thinking became rigid, and even some ignorant citizens directly resented Henry II, who was far away in Paris. Although they didn't know whether His Majesty the King had done this, he was sure of the blame. If Edward knew about this, he would definitely praise Major James. This method is wonderful. It not only preserved his reputation, but also made Henry II lose the popular support of Francisco, and the difficulty of attacking in the future was greatly reduced. Although for the king, the people's hearts are useless, as long as the army is in hand. Edward still retains the titles of King of France and Duke of Normandy, although he currently only rules the Channel Islands and the 2 cities of Calais and Boulogne. However, as long as you have a name, you will be on the side of justice when sending troops. In addition, the people are dissatisfied with the current king, not seeking support, only seeking neutrality, and it can be used when necessary. 1949, June 9th, London. London Bridge is a necessary road in and out of London. Countless people pass through London Bridge every day. To borrow an exaggerated saying from this era, you can take a piece of shit from a bridge and you can hide a person or a boat. Of course, you also have to be careful of the strong wind on the bridge. If you accidentally fall down and fall into the Thames River, which is mixed with excrement, urine, garbage and sewage, even if you are rescued by passing ships, it will be hard to live after being poisoned. Like most city gates in this era, at the entrance of London Bridge, there is always a checkpoint for tax collection. Several majestic-looking tax collectors swaggered in front of London Bridge, collecting taxes with a contemptuous attitude. The custom was 1 penny per person, 5 pence for livestock, 1 shilling for carriages, and 6 pence per pound for goods. After such a day, thousands of people came in and out, and the tax collected reached about £100, which was £30,000 a month. Moreover, even nobles are not exempt. This is the law of London. No matter how fast the speed is, if they come one by one like this, the passing team will still form a long queue. If they encounter a large caravan, the queue will be even longer. At this time, 2 white horses were slowly driven by a middle-aged groom and pulled a spacious and gorgeous carriage. and stopped behind the opposing team. After that, another carriage with 2 black horses also stopped slowly. The roof was covered with silk, and many pearls were inlaid on the curtains. It seemed that the owner of the carriage was much richer than the previous carriage owner. As if hearing the sound of a carriage arriving behind, the groom in front glanced back, looked at the distinctive family crest on the carriage, and then whispered to the owner in the carriage afterwards. The male owner in the car thought for a while, and felt that this was not the time to say hello, and the queue ahead would soon be their turn, so he decided to give up. The driver behind also saw the family emblem of the carriage in front, and the owner also made the same idea. After a while, the 2 carriages quickly passed London Bridge and came to the city of London. However, the 2 carriages slowed down and drove one after the other. With a distance of less than 5 feet in the end, the 2 carriages arrived at an ordinary house in a wealthy area at the same time, and the carriages also stopped. A gray-haired elderly man with white exaggerated shoulders on the upper body, black tights on the lower body, a tall hat and a cane walked up and down the luxurious-looking carriage. Got a carriage on the other carriage. A tall man with blonde curly hair stepped down. He hurried to the front carriage, bowed and bowed. "Good day, Seymour." The middle-aged man bent down with some difficulty. The flesh on his stomach was squeezed into a ball, looking very uncomfortable. "Good day, Mr. Straw." The old man smiled and also bowed to express his thanks. "Today is really destined, Seymour. I never expected to arrive in London on the same day as you." Richard Straw was still smiling, although he wondered why the sick Lord Speaker had come. "Compliments, yes. What a fate," Seymour said with a smile inside. "It's just..." Richard hesitated for a moment, and glanced at the rickety old man. "Your body, by God's grace, my health is still fine." As if seeing Richard's doubts, the old man waved his hand. "This is the first time His Majesty the King convened a parliament. How could I not come? Seymour is over 60 years old this year. He has also been plagued by illness for the past few years. He has not participated in the parliament for a long time, but he came suddenly today. This really makes people doubtful. I'm glad you're still in such good health." Richard put on an expression of joy, as if he were happy for Seymour. "See you tomorrow, sir." Seeing Seymour's tired face, Richard consciously chose to leave afterwards. Under Seymour's turbid gaze, Richard Straw boarded his carriage and left slowly. Richard Straw, as the member of the House of Commons with the most prestige after Seymour, is usually the one who presides over the House of Commons when Seymour is away. Regarding today, Seymour, who had not appeared in Parliament for a long time, suddenly appeared in London, which made Richard feel a little puzzled. Generally speaking, Seymour has always been a representative of the royal family in the House of Commons. He is a conservative and hopes to maintain the current situation, and Richard Straw is an aggressive faction. He hopes to expand the power of the lower parliament and gain more power, so he has been fighting for it during the council of the young king. The sudden arrival of Seymour puzzled all the councils and nobles in London. However, Seymour had a reason to come. This was the glorious moment when Scotland merged into England. This historical moment must be realized under his hands, even if he dragged his sick body. Chapter 181 Negotiation. Just when the councillors of the City of London arrived one after another, Kyle Lance took a few personal guards, sat in a carriage, wandered around for 3 or 4 days, and finally arrived in Paris, the Louvre, where Henry II is temporarily resting palace. As a palace of the royal family, the Louvre was originally designed as a defensive palace. Even if it was later expanded to be more brilliant, it only had face for the king and no sense of comfort. Of course, for Henry II, the Louvre is full of the marks of his father Francois I, but he has always harbored resentment towards his father in his heart. He hates this palace, and he prefers Fontainebleau Palace. However, in order to maintain the majesty of the king, in addition to adding various artworks to increase the king's reputation, he only came from the leisurely Maple Palace when there were important events to be received at this time. In the magnificent and solemn Louvre, in a luxuriously decorated room filled with various works of art, Henry II had unspeakable anger on his face. In front of him, François de Guise, Duke of Guise, and Archbishop Charles and Cardinal looked serious, not daring to provoke the king's wrath. They knew that the king in front of them had been abused by the King of Spain when he was a child, and after returning to France, his temper was very irritable. And he belonged to the type of burning at a moment at this time. Although he loves artworks as much as his father, at this time, no matter how perfect the artwork is, it cannot escape his anger. Boom! A human body sculpture was instantly shattered in front of everyone. And immediately after, the oil painting on the wall could not escape the murderous hands. In an instant, a portrait worth several hundred gold coins was torn apart. What a waste! What a famous naval officer, what a waste. Henry II cursed angrily with his eyes glowing with so many ships, none of them came back, and let the English show off their might, what a waste. Henry II's anger came and went quickly, and within a short while, he calmed down by himself. You said, what should we do? We can't let the English keep showing off in front of us. Henry II turned his attention to the Duke of Guise and asked as a loyal Catholic, the Duke of Guise, like Henry II, hated those Huguenots, Calvinists, so the Duke of Guise has always been Henry II's trusted minister. Your Majesty, news just came that Port Francisco was captured by the English. Duke Guise lowered his head slightly and said in a muffled voice, what? The English have the guts. Don't they want to experience defeat? Hearing that the port had been captured, Henry II frowned and asked sharply, Your Majesty, just now, the English sent envoys to negotiate. As a staunch Catholic on the side, Bishop Charles looked at Henry II, who was about to get angry, and said softly, Oh? Really? I'd like to see what the envoy has to say. Henry II's eyes flashed coldly, his anger subsided instantly, and he sneered, Yes, Your Majesty. The waiter at the side quickly trotted over to call the Duke of Guise, and Bishop Charles stood aside, and they also wanted to see what the messenger was here for. After receiving the summons, Kyle Lance quickly straightened his clothes and followed the waiters to the palace. Your Majesty the King, I am very glad that you are able to meet me. I am extremely honored. Kyle Lance said respectfully with a smile on his face after bending and bowing. Speak. What did your young king tell me? Henry II said contemptuously with his lips curled up. Your Majesty, Our Majesty is angry with you for sending your fleet against England without reason. Fortunately, with the blessing of God, we defeated your army, and in order to show our respect, we also sent troops to occupy Francisco. Facing the dismissive Henry II, Kyle Lance said, neither humble nor humble. HMPH. Don't think that I can't do anything after you captured Francisco. I don't think you will be defeated by my army in a day's time. Henry II didn't take this threat to heart at all. Looking at the English envoy in front of him, he said with a sneer, I advise you to give up this idea. This method will not do anything to me. Sooner or later, I will attack England and capture your king alive. For this situation, Kyle had expected that their first purpose of occupying the city was to search for money, and the second was as a bargaining chip. However, as far as I know, your country's navy is almost exhausted, right? Kyle said with a dignified attitude without blinking his eyelids, still speaking at his usual speed. What's the matter? In a few months, when the ship is built, our navy will immediately return to normal. Henry II replied indifferently, without even looking at Kyle. However, Your Majesty, if our English navy has been blocking your country's ports or harassing your country's coasts for the past few months, I'm afraid it will be difficult to estimate your losses. At this time, Kyle was like a cunning fox, analyzing Henry II step by step, and seemed to be thinking about him all the time. In this way, after a few months, I'm afraid you will have no money to build a ship. Besides, your creditors may also come to your door. This is not good news, Kyle said with a smile as always, which seemed to Henry II to be even more hateful. Kyle knew that Henry II was willing to see him, so he had plans for peace talks. After all, France had more than one enemy, and there was a behemoth Spain beside him. France certainly cannot cope with England and Spain attacking at the same time. Seeing Henry II, who was speechless for a while, Kyle continued, we hope that your country can recognize the fact that Scotland has been incorporated into our country, and will no longer invade our country under the banner of restoring Scotland. It's impossible. As soon as the words fell, Henry II said without hesitation, cleanly and without any delay, Scotland has always been an independent country, and your methods in England are despicable and shameless. Besides, for hundreds of years, Scotland has signed a treaty of alliance after us, and France has always kept its promise. On the side, the Duke of Guise came out and said loudly, with an upright look. Hearing the words of the Duke of Guise, Kyle barely let himself laugh. The reputation of the French is more rubbish than shit, not to mention the various repudiations after Francois was captured by Spain, signed various treaties and was released. It was the Treaty of Greenwich signed by Henry VIII with the French and the Scots. And the French were shamelessly preparing to marry Queen Mary to France, completely disregarding the marriage between Edward and Queen Mary as determined in the treaty. The insertion of the Duke of Guise, which let Kyle know that he has changed his negotiating partner. Sure enough, Henry II, who had been having a lively conversation before, was sitting in his seat at this time, watching the two with relish. However, the Greenwich Treaty signed between your country and our country stipulates that Queen Mary will marry His Majesty, but your country wants Queen Mary to marry your prince. Isn't it a violation of the promise? Your Excellency's words are wrong. Queen Mary just wanted to visit me in France. You know, I am still Her Majesty's grandfather. Regarding this matter, the Duke of Guise hastily denied it, and even found an excuse brazenly so. Between you and me, the two slowly negotiated. Chapter 182 Overview of London Reform. Since the Hanseatic merchants were heavily taxed by Edward, merchants from all over England flocked to London like hungry tigers, vying for the market share of the Hanseatic merchants. As a result, overnight, the Hanseatic merchants almost fell from their dominance in the market, and could only firmly control the timber and fish industries, while other industries had been completely captured by English merchants. For this matter, Edward is happy to see the results. It is better to rot on the pot than to be eaten by others, and he has collected a lot more taxes. Your Majesty, please let me introduce to you the achievements of the entire London city government in the past few months. At this time, in the new building of the City of London, the mayor's office on the spacious and comfortable mayor's seat, there is a teenager sitting at this moment. I saw that he had blonde curly hair like the English people at this time, dark blue and bright eyes, a straight nose, and milk-like skin. He was about 5 feet tall, only half a head lower than ordinary adults. He sat on the chair with a relaxed expression, and the good wool was padded under his buttocks, which was extremely soft to sit on. The young man's eyes turned to the document in front of him, which was a record of London's financial situation in the past few months. Recording the specific financial situation in front of him, the Mayor of London, William Celsey, was bending over and reporting to the young man respectfully. He glanced at Edward, who was concentrating on the information. The beard under his nose was already covered with the green beard, which was soft, which added a lot of maturity to the young king, and after the Scottish incident, the king's prestige had already disappeared. It is almost the same as Henry VIII in normal times. At least, in England, there are not many people who dare to contend with him, even if Duke Edward comes out of the mountain, and the best proof is that since May, there has not been a single riot in the country, and the whole of England has been in a state of peace. After tidying up his thoughts, Mayor William continued, from March to June, the municipal government's fiscal revenue has doubled from £15,000 per month to £30,000 per month. The taxes handed over to the finance office have accumulated to £65,000. Edward lightly expressed his understanding with a light yes. According to the regulations, when the city government was established, the London city government has to pay taxes to the Treasury Department every month, with a ratio of 30 to 70%. As an institution independent of the Privy Council, the Finance Department is directly responsible to Edward, and the person in charge said similar figures. From this we can see the need for Edward to abolish the London Home Rule Council. At present, in the whole of England, almost 60% of the money and factories are gathered in London. Controlling London is equivalent to controlling half of England. Edward is not at ease if such an important land is not controlled in his hands. Seeing that His Majesty the King was still buried in the documents, Mayor William could only continue to say, according to your request, the London city government has established 9,600 household districts in the City of London. Each 100 household district has a mayor, a magistrate, a tax officer, and 4 clerks under its banner. A total of there are 8,000 household districts, and every 1,200 household districts form a 1,000 household district. Each 1,000 household district has a head of the district, a deputy head of the district, a chief magistrate, and a deputy chief magistrate, 1 chief tax officer, 1 deputy chief tax officer, and 10 clerks each. The same arrangement is made outside London. There are 1,680 household districts and 14,000 household districts outside the city. There are 2,640 household districts and 22,000 household districts in total district. According to Henry VIII's arrangement, the local area is generally set up as a 100 household district county. According to China's administrative division, if a 100 household district is a village, a county is a county, but there are no towns or townships in the middle. The most important thing is that the 100 household district and the county are parallel. That is to say, the county is not in charge of the 100 household district, and both are directly responsible to the king. As a result, the hundreds of households in the local area were completely controlled by the local gentry. Anyway, the county lieutenant, let's call it the county lieutenant, the magistrate is easily confused with a magistrate, and the sheriff are still appointed by the king. As for the 100 household district, after making arrangements by themselves, they directly submit candidates to the king, and the king generally agrees directly, and cannot manage them directly. Therefore, Edward directly established a 1,000 household district as an intermediate hub between the county and the 100 household district, and as a bridge to connect the upper and lower. Of course, this is just Edward's idea. It just needs to be tested in London in the early stage. If it works well, it will be implemented nationwide. Hearing this, Edward silently calculated in his heart. Based on the calculation of 5 people per household, there are at least 130,000 people in London, which is quite a lot then. My Lord Mayor, what is the total population of London? After thinking silently in his mind, Edward raised his head, a little curious in his heart, and then asked softly. Mayor William himself is quite interested in this question. Fortunately, he read it several times and remembered it fairly well. Your Majesty. After 3 months of rough calculations by the city government, the number of people living in London has reached more than 156,500, and half of them are underage children. Mayor William said in a surprised tone, with a look of shock on his face. 150,000 people. If some omissions are counted, 160,000 is still possible. Moreover, there is no poll tax at this time, and no one wants to deliberately conceal the number, so the data is still credible. Moreover, half of them are children, which is also consistent with Edward's memory. 150,000 people. This is only the population of a small county in later generations, but in today's Europe, this is indeed a large city at this time. England has a total population of only 3 million, of which 1/20th is in London, which puts enormous pressure on the London city government. London needs to import hundreds of tons of grain every month to meet the demand, and the security pressure brought by such a large population is unparalleled. At the end of the Middle Ages, greed and crime were the main themes of society. In a city of 150,000 people, hundreds of corpses were pulled out of the city by corpse collectors every morning, and there were many more lying in corners that no one cares about. It slowly stinks, rots, and is eaten by rats, which eventually multiply and expand in the city of London. In the end, the plague would break out in the city of London, and a large number of people would die. My Mr. Mayor, I don't think there are enough police officers in London. Edward said solemnly. It's not enough. Edward said in a harsh voice, I need the number of police officers in London to reach 500, so that London can function normally. Yes, Your Majesty. Although he didn't know why, Mayor William still complied. I will follow your instructions. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183, Meeting of Parliament. At the same time, a conversation was also taking place in the office of His Excellency the President of the Privy Council, but the content was different. Ferris Alexander, the Dean of the Privy Council, sat at the top, and behind him, an old man with white hair and a little thinning was sitting on his right hand, holding a cane. Speaker of the House of Lords, Duke Per Horton. Then sitting to the left is the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Thomas More. Your Excellency the Duke. Your Excellency, I really have troubled you this time, so please take a trip. As the youngest Privy Councillor without a title, Ferris said first. It's nothing, it's just serving His Majesty, it's just our duty. Duke Holden waved his hands indifferently, speaking in a hoarse voice. Your Majesty, the Duke is right. It doesn't matter what we do for His Majesty's service. This is what we should do. Sir Moore took the words, and his words were so beautiful that anyone could see his loyalty to His Majesty the King. Thank you two adults for your sighs, Ferris said gently, expressing his gratitude to the two. This time I invite the two adults to come here, as long as it is for tomorrow's Parliament. We know about this, please explain it in detail. Duke Holden blinked, revealing cloudy eyeballs, interrupting Ferris. Yes. Ferris nodded helplessly. He didn't have the guts to quarrel with the Duke. The convening of this Parliament is for the purpose of passing the merger of Scotland and England. His Majesty the King has added some parliamentary seats, which requires the approval of the Parliament, and also determines the succession of the United Kingdom stipulated by His Majesty the King in the form of law. Ferris finished speaking in one breath, without a break in the middle. We all understand this, and this is what our parliamentarians should do. I think it will be passed in the end. I hope that the Minister and His Majesty the King will express our intentions. Duke Holden nodded lightly to express his understanding, and then said what he meant. My Lord Duke's words are also what I mean. The House of Commons will definitely pass this resolution. Please tell Your Majesty so he can rest assured. Sir Moore immediately echoed, I will convey Your Majesty's meaning, and I think Your Majesty will be satisfied. Ferris said with a smile towards the two. In fact, Ferris understands that the probability of the bill being passed in Parliament is 100%, and there is no doubt about it. However, It was not for this matter that he invited these two masters. Thinking about it, Ferris's smile suddenly disappeared, his expression solemn. The Duke of Horton and Seymour also restrained their smiles and looked serious. His Majesty the King not only needs the Parliament to pass a bill this time, but also needs the Parliament to approve His Majesty the King's tax collection. The tone of Ferris' last sentence became heavier, and then he focused his gaze on Seymour's face. And the same was true of Duke Holden on the side. The House of Commons has the power to approve tax collections, but the House of Lords does not. So Seymour's opinion is so important at this time. When Seymour heard the news that His Majesty the King was going to levy taxes, he immediately relaxed. Generally speaking, as long as His Majesty the King has a reasonable reason, the Parliament will definitely approve the tax collection. But isn't the war over, Your Excellency? Isn't the war over? Seymour felt a little strange. The expedition to Scotland is over, but His Majesty the King is very angry at the French attacking us, and has begun to send troops to prepare for a counterattack. Speaking, Ferris showed an expression of righteous indignation to express his hatred for the French. That's true. Seymour could only agree, but he still felt a little bitter in his heart. In England, due to the long-term war between the two countries for hundreds of years, a large number of English people were killed by the French, which caused the entire English society to hate France. This is also a kind of political correctness. It's just that each war is not only a large number of casualties for England. Of course, the nobles don't care about the casualties of these civilians, but more importantly, it requires a lot of money. Therefore, we can only increase taxes. Most of the nobles have started to do business. Once taxes are increased, the losses will be huge. I think the congressman will agree to this matter. Seymour nodded without much hesitation. However, this time is a little different from the past. The evil dividing line. The next day, there was a light rain in London early in the morning, and the air was much fresher. The civilians who run around for food all day long have already woken up and are ready to work. The whole of London has started another lively and busy day. However, starting this morning, carriages slowly gathered in front of Westminster Abbey, and well-dressed gentlemen stepped down. If you're an old man in London, you know it's Parliament Day again. Richly dressed nobles and haughty prelates marched to the House of Lords. Emotional, relatively modestly dressed gentlemen entered the House of Commons. Initially, the House of Commons voted after a reading of documents by the Speaker. All MPs voted for the merger of Scotland into England to form the United Kingdom. Afterwards, the House of Lords voted on the results of the House of Commons vote, and the result, as expected, was unanimously passed. Shortly afterwards, Parliament passed the United Kingdom's succession to the throne law. The inheritance law stipulates that the principle of male priority, the first echelon in the royal family is the heir of the king, and the male heir has priority over the female heir. If there is no prince, the female heir will take the throne. If the king has no heirs, the king's siblings are candidates, and male succession is also preferred. However, unlike other countries, there is a premise. The bill drafted by Edward this time stipulates that the sequence of succession to the throne shall be arranged by the king. Although Edward knew the benefits of the patriarchal system, he still wanted to use talent selection. Besides, if it doesn't work, in the end, follow the old rules. Moreover, in order to fear that the Parliament would be like the Stuart dynasty, James I had a son, but he had a daughter, and in the end he even directly selected a relative who did not know how many generations to inherit the throne. Everything is arranged according to the table. Whoever is on the inheritance table has the right to inherit, and whoever is the heir to the throne ranks first and who is most qualified. As for the matter of royal succession, members of Parliament could not interfere, so they passed it unanimously. Next is the main event, approving the king to collect subsidies, and this subsidy is different. Chapter 184, Internal and External Financial Division. The passage of these two proposals has not passed through any obstacles, and the MPs will not oppose the king in this matter. Generally speaking, as long as the king does not violate the principle, then the Parliament has always been under the control of the king, acting as an obedient institution to assist the king in England's control. After all, nominally speaking, Parliament is the public opinion of England and the representative of the people of the whole country. For this, Ferris Alexander, the president of the Privy Council, kept smiling, calmly watching the votes of the members and the reading of the votes by the Speaker. Today's third proposal, this time will be explained by His Excellency Ferris Alexander, President of the Privy Council. Your Excellency, Minister. Standing on the podium in the center, the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Thomas More, opened his eyes slightly, and with a somewhat hoarse voice, announced loudly to the MPs in front of him. Behind him immediately, as Ferris was on his way to the parliamentary stage, bursts of intense applause rang in his ears. Ferris was unmoved, and slowly stepped onto the podium with a friendly smile on his face. At this moment, The applause from below became more and more intense. This was a tribute from the members of Parliament to the minister speaking of it. The members of the Parliament are also pitiful. Although they hold power, their own privileges need to be protected by the king. During the period of Henry VIII, 3 privileges of parliamentarians were finally established: free speech, immunity, and self-discipline. These 3 rights are guaranteed in the name of the king, but they make this group of citizens and knights who have never enjoyed privileges very happy. Therefore, this is also one of the powerful ways for the king to control the House of Representatives. Adjusting his emotions, Ferris was still a little nervous in the face of the gaze of more than 300 people. Good day, members of Parliament. This time, on behalf of the Holy and Great His Majesty Edward VI, I am here to explain the specifics of this bill to you and gentlemen. Ferris's voice was thick and magnetic, but his attitude was very humble. Compared with the Duke of Somerset, he treated people calmly and without arrogance. Of course, this is also related to the identities of the two of them. Although Ferris is the head of the Privy Council, he is not of noble origin, and some of the members below him are indeed knights, so their attitude is naturally much more humble than that of Duke Edward. This attitude has won the favor of many MPs. In English society, they are a group of prostitutes with a higher status than farmers, but they don't have much rights, but they like to discuss state affairs. They are very satisfied with the peaceful attitude of the Privy Council president. Like, first of all, according to His Majesty's request, due to the huge expenditure of the war, the royal family's finances are overwhelmed. For the safety and interests of the English people, His Majesty the King hopes that the Parliament will approve the reimposition of royal subsidies in order to achieve the purpose of maintaining national security. Ferris had a steady demeanor, his sentences were fluent, and his voice was very loud, and every word was transmitted to the ears of the sitting congressman. After such a long paragraph was finished, the congressmen below also exploded with a bang, and the congressmen whispered to each other and began to discuss in this regard. The speaker, Seymour, did not stop it. These are just common practices, and this is the case before every bill is passed. The MPs showed no surprise at the proposal to levy subsidy, nor did they have the slightest intention to stop it. They were just curious that His Majesty the King did not levy subsidy until now, which was beyond their expectations. Ferris glanced at the members who were discussing, and turned his eyes away from Seymour. Immediately, Sir waved a small hammer in his hand and knocked on the podium, making a dong-dong sound. Quiet, be quiet, gentlemen. Seeing Seymour knock the hammer to death, the MPs immediately fell silent and sat obediently. But this subsidy is different. His Majesty the King believes that the next war will be continuous. In order to avoid the trouble of reconvening the Parliament, His Majesty the King hopes that the time for the subsidy collection will be fixed permanently. Of course, wait after the war is over, the King will automatically cancel it. A sentence came out of Ferris's mouth, with a pure London accent, matched with his leisurely expression, as if to say to the congressman, "This is a trivial matter." Everyone agreed quickly, "Wow." After Ferris finished speaking, the members of Parliament below began to boil like boiling water. The voices of the members of the Congress became louder and louder, and their favor for the minister quickly disappeared, replaced by its anger. Ferris felt that the group of congressmen below was about to be set on fire. If he was an ordinary person, he would have been beaten to death with a stick. It's a pity that he is the head of the Privy Council, His Majesty's highest advisor. No member of Parliament dares to attack him, no one even dares to question him. After all, this is not a later Parliament, and the councillors are just ordinary citizens and knights. After doing something and questioning, think about the consequences. Even so, the congressmen have made up their minds to abort this proposal, even if it offends the king. After a while, the MPs below became quiet, and the atmosphere was a bit heavy. Ferris could also guess the mentality of the congressmen at this time, smiled and continued, "For this reason, His Majesty the King promises that he will not use any subsidy, not even a penny, except for customs duties and tithes. Moreover, the subsidy will be managed by the Ministry of Finance, which is formed by the merger of the Privy Council's Financial Revenue and Expenditure Management Office and the Finance Department. The Parliament can supervise the review of the Privy Council's financial budget at the beginning of each year, and usually has supervisory power. If His Majesty the King uses a silver coin from the Ministry of Finance, the Parliament has the right to terminate the collection of subsidies." In fact, Edward really racked his brains, as did I, on how to seize the power to levy taxes. Finally, he thought that he could split the royal finances and the Privy Council finances, that is, the inner court and the national treasury were divided into 2 halves, and each managed its own. Regarding this, the congressman reluctantly accepted a little bit, but they were still not used to throwing away this bargaining chip that could blackmail the king. More importantly, they only had the right to supervise in the future, and they had less power in their hands in this regard. The MPs are still somewhat dissatisfied. The parliament was established to control the royal power. If the king gets the permanent right to expropriate the subsidy, even if he doesn't use any of it, the royal power will definitely flourish. What's more, if the subsidy is permanently collected, it will definitely damage their interests, but if the king no longer collects taxes randomly, it can be reluctantly accepted. Everyone, His Majesty the King asked me to tell you that it is an irrational act to go against the will of the king. Seeing the hesitation on the faces of most of the members, Ferris finally added, as soon as these words came out, the faces of all the councillors changed, and at the same time they thought of the Tower of London in their hearts. Chapter 185 Proposal approved. After saying this softly, Ferris had a sneer in front of him. Seeing the discolored expressions of the MPs below, his heart became more and more disdainful. However, the MPs below were beating their hearts. If they were not there at that time, they would not understand the status of the Tower of London in people's hearts. The Tower of London was built in 1078. It has been used as a royal palace, as a court, and later as a prison. The Tower of London covers an area of 7.2 hectares, surrounded by a thick wall of huge stones. There are many forts and arrow towers on the city wall, surrounded by a wide and deep moat. If you want to run to this kind of place, you can only ask for a dead end as the king's royal prison. All the well-known political prisoners can be detained here. For example, Edward IV's son Edward V and the Duke of York, and even Princess Elizabeth was beaten into the Tower of London by Mary I. This is nothing scary. The most important thing is that not only is there torture here, but after entering, basically don't plan to go out. Either stay until death or be killed. Only a few people can go out. Even Princess Elizabeth was able to come out because there was no heir left after the death of Mary I. As the only heir to the Tudor royal family, she must come out. If you have to make an analogy, the Tower of London is equivalent to the imperial prison of the imperial guards in the Ming dynasty, which is the Sky Prison in folklore. It's no wonder that the faces of these congressmen are ugly. And Seymour on the side is also frowning, with a disgusted expression. This is still a minister blatantly threatening members of parliament. Indirect threats, which brings a great shock to people. Of course, if you want people to do things, you have to have a big stick and a carrot in one hand, so that it will be effective as compensation. His Majesty the King believes that the Parliament has the right to supervise the implementation of the Privy Council, and has the right to impeach any official from the King. As long as the evidence is convincing, His Majesty the King will review, remove or punish him. As compensation, Edward gave the power of supervision to Parliament, which was unprecedented in history. Of course, Edward still has his own thoughts in doing so. First, after the bureaucracy is established, there must be a strong supervisory organization. Currently, the supervision within the bureaucratic system is not very effective, and it is very easy to corrupt as an independent institution. The Parliament obviously fits this role. Its members are all urban citizens and local gentlemen and knights. Those who can be selected by the local government must be elites, and the supervision effect is very great. The second thing is to let the Parliament find something to do for the Parliament, so that they can stand in the King's camp and become an assistant to the King's rule. You must know that the purpose of the establishment of the Parliament is to limit the King's power, but if it is diverted to deal with the bureaucrats, then it will not have the energy to limit the King, but will become a boost to the King's power. Moreover, such a success rate is very high. Members of the Parliament are local elites. They are not like the nobles who can directly participate in politics, and the Parliament has become their only candidate for participating in politics. At the beginning of the 16th century, there were only 296 members in the House of Commons, but by the end of the century, it had reached 462 members. Local elites became more and more enthusiastic about entering the House of Commons and participating in politics, and Edward decided to give them greater power, which has more privileges. In addition to freedom of speech, immunity, and self-discipline, Edward has to give them some more over, in order to better enable the members of Parliament to serve His Majesty the King. His Majesty the King will withdraw some funds from the Treasury and the royal family as allowances for you every month, and His Majesty the King will not only establish the freedom of speech, immunity and self-discipline rights of members of Parliament, plus the right to directly ask the King and submit letters secretly, with a high profile, Ferris continued, and His Majesty the King will stipulate that no one in nobility shall insult or beat any member of Parliament in public, and these, His Majesty the King will establish in the form of legislation to protect the rights of the MPs. For parliamentarians, if supervisory powers are compensation, Stipends and freedom to see the king are great surprises, and the last one, not to insult and beat the congressman, made the congressman feel the sound of nature, which greatly satisfied their vanity, and it also had dignity. Nowadays, nobles generally do not break the law when they kill people. Moreover, they are all citizens, gentlemen, and knights. In theory, they don't have the slightest sense of dignity in front of nobles, and they can beat, scold, or even kill at will. Of course, the nobles only need to pay a fine afterwards, and there is no such thing as a life for a life. These few words of Ferris successfully bought the hearts of these congressmen. What is the right to tax? At most it makes the king uncomfortable, and he gets nothing besides. I didn't completely give up the right to tax, just gave up the approval of subsidies, and even if the king asks for it in the future, can you not agree? Moreover, to get so many benefits, even if you give up the right to tax, you are willing. The expressions on the faces of the congressmen became more and more brilliant, and they discussed happily one by one, and the atmosphere became more and more heated. At this time, Seymour looked at Ferris on the podium in astonishment, opened his mouth, but did not make any sound. There was only one question in his mind: after the king reformed the House of Lords, did he start attacking the House of Commons? In fact, he knew in his heart that the Parliament's control over the king was becoming looser and looser, and in the end it would definitely fall into the king's hands and become his tool. In fact, it was the Tudor kings who started the transformation of the House of Lords. Firstly, the aristocratic upper house was integrated, the aristocratic members were turned into aristocrats, and the nobles were linked with the upper house. Secondly, the senior priests were slowly driven out of the upper house, allowing the nobles to occupy the main seats. Then the voting rights of legislative and judicial officials were abolished, and the House of Lords became a legislative body without judicial power. Seeing the excited expressions of the congressman below, Ferris couldn't help but nodded. The passage of this bill is very sure. In fact, at the beginning, Ferris was unwilling, maybe because of jealousy, that His Majesty the King gave these members of the lower parliament so many rights, but until now, he realized that if the parliament passed this proposal, then the parliament's suppression of the king would be lost in one fell swoop. After that, with the permanent taxation power of the subsidy, after the parliament lost its biggest bargaining chip, the parliament's restrictive effect on the king was greatly reduced, and finally it could only be allowed to be abused by the king. Of course, some members will see the reason behind this proposal after that. After 303 members of parliament voted, the proposal was finally passed with 267 votes in favor and 36 against. Chapter 186, New Era. Soon, the news that the proposal was passed quickly reached the Whitehall Palace, and then it reached Edward's ears. After hearing the news, the corners of Edward's mouth could not help but curl up slightly, and the atmosphere in the whole room suddenly relaxed, and the little maid Lucy standing beside her couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Since he woke up in the morning, His Majesty the King has been keeping a straight face, as if he should not be approached by strangers. Not only the other servants, but even her personal maid, is frightened, for fear that the king will lose his temper. Companion to a king is like a tiger. In front of the most powerful king in England, even if he is just a joke, he can let you go to God, and you have nothing to say. Seeing His Majesty's complexion, all the servants in the palace were extremely cautious, for fear of offending His Majesty the King. Therefore, the entire palace was very quiet, unusually quiet, and the only sound that could be heard was the chirping of birds outside the window. However, the Queen Mother Mary and Queen Mary have been staying in Windsor Castle and refused to come to London for various reasons. The same is true for Princess Elizabeth and Princess Mary. They are both in Windsor Castle at this time, leaving His Majesty alone. Whitehall Palace. His Majesty's smile made Lucy feel a lot lighter on her shoulders, and the whole room was much brighter, and she immediately relaxed her mood. Lucy bent over, showed a sweet smile, added hot water to His Majesty's teacup, and presented a seductive tease in front of Edward. Edward glanced at it, narrowed his eyes slightly, and returned to reading. After Lucy finished, Lucy didn't realize that His Majesty the King was taking advantage of her, but doubts arose in her heart. At this moment Lucy studied the question of why His Majesty the King likes to drink tea for a long time, and she even tasted it herself. But it turned out that a bitter taste penetrated her tongue, and her whole mouth was filled with a screen bitter taste. This made Lucy regret it in her heart. The smell was too painful. It was simply the poisonous water from hell. This made Lucy even more curious. She couldn't figure out why His Majesty the King liked to drink this. As the saying goes, what is good at the top will be effective at the bottom. His Majesty the King likes to drink tea. In order to establish a good relationship with His Majesty the King, you must do what you like and learn how to drink tea. As a result, the nobles went to drink tea one after another and never returned, All kinds of bitterness and sadness are simply indescribable historically. The English still liked drinking tea until the establishment of the East India Company. In order to obtain better benefits, the East India Company spent a lot of time and money to cultivate the habit of drinking tea among the British. After hundreds of years, the British finally fell in love with tea, and afternoon tea has become a British culture. However, when they drink tea, they also add some milk, spices and so on. They never drink tea directly, which directly kills these nobles. As a result, the price of honey in England has been skyrocketing, making the merchants a fortune. Of course, Edward didn't know this. He just wanted to shout in his heart at this moment, "England, I will finally conquer you." The largest type of taxation in England is permanently in his hands, so the taxation power of the lower parliament has lost the largest piece of territory. The most essential part has been taken down, so the rest is not enough to rely on. It can be fried and braised slowly. He is not in a hurry. This matter can be done slowly. It wasn't just Edward who was waiting for this result. At this time, the master of the Anglican sect in England, Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, was also quietly waiting for this result. Bishop Thomas had not attended a meeting of the Privy Council since the fall of Warwick, nor had he answered Edward's call to the House of Lords. Yes, at this time the number of the House of Lords is not regulated. As long as His Majesty the King looks at you and calls you, you can join the House of Lords. It can be said that the House of Lords is basically the seal of the king. Whenever the king needs anything, the House of Lords hastily pass the proposal, much more efficiently than the House of Commons. Not attending the House of Lords does not mean that Bishop Thomas does not care about this parliamentary meeting. And the Archbishop of York, another Anglican in England, second only to the position of the Archbishop of Canterbury, he was also on the sidelines, waiting quietly with Bishop Thomas. He did not go to the king's call this time either, on the pretext that he was not in good health and could not serve the king. As the two supreme powers of the Anglican sect, they are the biggest bishops in the church when the king is not in charge, and the two of them are also the promoters of the religious reform, and have been assisting the king and the church to carry out reforms. They don't know what kind of proposals will be held in the House of Commons this time, but their instincts tell themselves that today is different. Sure enough, the servant sent a message. The most important one is, the subsidy is permanent. Hearing this news, the two bishops couldn't help being startled. They sat on chairs with bitter faces and looked at each other. It seems that what you said is right. This His Majesty the King is really a different character from the previous king. It is really an eye-opener. The Bishop of York looked older, with thinning hair, thick bags under the eyes, and age spots on his face that seemed to speak of his age. Regarding this news, he couldn't help but shook his head with a wry smile, and said to Bishop Thomas yes. When he used the Earl of Warwick to drive out the Duke of Somerset, and then took the opportunity to drive the Earl of Warwick out of court, I thought he was another Henry VIII, and when I saw that he abolished the London Self-Government Council and established a London municipal government, I realized that he was still different from the previous king. When Bishop Thomas picked up the words, he also smiled helplessly, exclaiming with an unexpected expression, compared with the previous king, he is less domineering and more gentle and compromised. The Archbishop of York breathed a sigh of relief, looked in the direction of Whitehall Palace, and continued, if it was His Majesty Henry VIII, he would not give conditions in exchange, but would only use rights and death to make the MPs not in agreement. Bishop Thomas recalled for a moment, comparing Henry VIII with the current situation. It is precisely seeing this young His Majesty who knows how to exchange and compromise, which makes the congressmen have expectations in their hearts. They understand that if there is one, there will be two. We can get these things through this peaceful way today, and we may get more tomorrow. After all, not everyone is not afraid of death. After Bishop Thomas heard Bishop York's words, he stood up, opened the half-covered curtains, and bathed in the sunlight. England's new age has come, and I don't know whether it will die or be reborn. Chapter 187 Molested. As soon as the results of the lower parliament came out, they immediately spread to the whole country, and they were on the way to Wales, Scotland and Ireland at high speed. Of course, the first to know the news is the House of Lords, which is near the House of Commons, because during the period of Henry VIII, the king stipulated that the passage of each bill must be passed by both the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and only one of them must be passed. Therefore, after the bill passed the House of Commons, it was immediately sent to the House of Lords. The inner activities of the nobles and monks who received the proposal are complicated. Unlike the knights and citizens of the House of Commons, who have relatively low political abilities on average, nobles have never been able to do anything since they were young, but they are born with politics. They knew that with the passage of this bill, the original intention of the establishment of the parliament would be completely shattered. and it would become a vassal of the royal power. But so what if you know, even if all the nobles in England are united, they can't influence the king's thoughts like before, and they are basically the king's voice. So even though the nobles were unhappy, the proposal was passed quickly and neatly. So, on this day, basically the entire London residents knew that the United Kingdom was about to be established. But in the ears of nobles and gentlemen everywhere, they know that His Majesty has completely defeated Parliament, and the crown is stronger than ever. And Edward walked out of the room where he had been sleeping all morning with a happy mood, and walked around the Whitehall Palace to relax, and the little maid Lucy followed happily. Becoming a beautiful cloud, Edward walked ahead with strides, and Lucy followed closely behind. Lucy, where's your sister? Edward glanced at the delicate Lucy and asked curiously. Your Majesty, my sister is going to count the income. She has left London for the past few months. She needs to bring someone to verify the income of the taverns and strong wine in various places. Looking at Edward's dark blue eyes, Lucy's face was tinged with red, tenderly said, "Oh, I forgot." Edward patted his forehead, feeling that his memory was getting worse. After finishing speaking, he turned his head and continued to walk forward, and Lucy also followed step by step. While walking, Edward suddenly saw a row of beautiful girls standing upright in front of him, and his eyes lit up. He remembered that these were girls selected from the orphan army, and he let them serve as bodyguards, and they stayed when they were still young during the expedition to Scotland, he thought, then slowly walked over. There are 12 girls in a row, generally around the age of 14, which is the time when they are delicate and lovely, wearing clothes modified from the guard uniforms in the palace, with a bearskin cap on his head, a knee-less skirt on his lower body, black stockings on his calves, and a short sword pinned to his waist. He looks heroic and heroic. Don't have a flavor. Seeing the king coming, the female guards straightened their backs even more, and their chests looked more turbulent. Edward nodded with satisfaction, walked over, and suddenly saw the extremely beautiful girl in the lead. The face is delicate and beautiful, the skin is delicate, and the height is about 1.6 meters. It looks extremely tall in this era, but the black stockings on the slender legs are really very tempting. What was even more exciting was that the girls were so big that they were tightly held by the clothes, and the buttons on the clothes were about to burst, which made Edward worry about the clothes. Edward couldn't help watching carefully. What a fair lady. Always to be appreciated carefully. But to Edward's surprise, the girl looked at him with the eyes of a resentful woman, which made him a little baffled. Wait, isn't this the girl who was going to be the secretary at the beginning? What is it called? Emma. Edward has other things, and he forgot to arrange it for a while. Stopping, Edward looked at the explosive-looking female guard in front of him, with a smile on the corner of her mouth. Your name is Emma. Edward felt that his attitude was very friendly, and his smile became brighter. Yes, Your Majesty. Seeing that the king stopped beside her and asked her name, Emma's grievance immediately dissipated. Her mood was very happy, and a charming smile appeared on her face, and the other female guards couldn't help showing envious expressions, staring at the two of them intently. Well, you're fine. Edward patted the female guard, who was taller than himself, and praised for this inexplicable compliment. Emma was a little puzzled, but her face was slightly rosy, and she lowered her head. Seeing that the leader of the female guards became shy, Edward stopped molesting her. He didn't molested her a lot. Turning his head to the other maids who were full of envy, he said, "From now on, you will directly protect me personally, so you don't have to stand guard anymore," Edward said domineeringly. Then he whispered in Emma's ear, "You too." Afterwards, the girl's neck quickly turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye, and if you look carefully, you can still see tiny particles. Seeing the girl's head drooping more and more, almost reaching her chest, Edward laughed and left. But Lucy beside her couldn't help rolling her eyes, pursing her lips, glanced at Emma, and then quickly followed Edward. After the king left, the young girls surrounded Emma, chattering non-stop in the ear of the boss of their female guard, flirting with each other. Okay. Continue to stand guard. Today is the last day of work. Seeing that the sisters' molesting words became more and more outrageous, Emma couldn't help saying loudly. When the girls saw their captain lose their temper, they knew that she was embarrassed and understood that it should not be too much, so they slowly dispersed and continued to stand guard. Emma saw that everyone continued to stand guard, and then touched her red face with her hand, feeling a little hot. But she, who was full of resentment before, couldn't help showing a sweet smile. After Edward finished molesting the female guards, he almost walked around Whitehall Palace before returning to the palace. At this time, someone reported that Major James and Kyle Lance had asked to see him. Edward thought about it, but he was still ready to meet him. After the two saluted Edward, they straightened up. Your Majesty, after Major James occupied Francisco, I rushed to Paris non-stop and met King Henry VIII of France. Afterwards, Relying on His Majesty's reputation and my arguments, the French congratulated you on marrying Queen Mary, but they explicitly rejected the condition that they no longer send troops to Scotland. Kyle Lance spoke out first, speaking respectfully. The dead duck has a hard mouth, Edward said disdainfully upon hearing this. Chapter 188, Conferment. I knew they would do that. Edward said mockingly, the French's plan for Scotland is blatant, but unfortunately, we don't even look at his own strength. Yes, the French have always been so arrogant. How can Henry VIII compare to your brilliance and prowess? Kyle Lance smiled apologetically, and the flattering expression on his face was a bit nauseating. Like Major James. Okay, tell me, how much Henry VIII paid to redeem Francisco? Edward said with a serious face, staring at the charming Kyle Lance. Your Majesty, the French are willing to offer £5,000 to redeem Francisco, but they ask us to release the captured French naval soldiers and ships. They expressed their willingness to spend money to redeem them. For this matter, Kyle did not achieve any good results. After all, the French army could directly capture Francisco, and they would definitely not be able to defend it. What? Edward couldn't help but lose his voice when he heard the price. The French are really stingy. A city with a population of tens of thousands is only willing to spend £5,000. I have a new understanding of Gallic chicken. For this, Edward couldn't help curling his lips, showing disdainful eyes, and everyone could hear the contempt in his words. Then, my Major, it seems that you must have brought me some kind of surprise. Edward turned his gaze to Major James, with a kind and gentle tone. Your Majesty, relying on your reputation and admiration for you, the citizens of the entire city of Francisco are scrambling to do their best for us. I am very busy these days. Looking at Edward's pair of dangerous with a look in his eyes, James hurriedly puffed up his chest and made a little joke with his head down. Major James spoke in a respectful tone. Thanks to the donations of the citizens of Francisco City, as of yesterday, the donations have reached £160,000, although knowing that this cannot be the real number, those soldiers and officers must have concealed some, and it is more likely that Major James also secretly hid some, but now is not the time to care about these. Others have made contributions and sent you money. A few pounds are nothing, and you have to reward them. Your Excellency, Major, I am very satisfied with your performance. Edward Jamian nodded. Take £5,000 from King's Curry, and consider it my reward for the soldiers. More than 1,000 people, with an average of £4 per person, which is quite a lot in this era, equivalent to half a year's salary for them. Thank you, Your Majesty. I think those soldiers who got the news will definitely be overjoyed. Major James bowed quickly, with a huge surprise on his face, and said humbly. Edward nodded lightly. By the way, I will hold a knighthood ceremony in 3 days. Your Excellency, I think you should be ready. Edward glanced at Major James meaningfully, said softly, and then left slowly, leaving a surprised look on his face. The distraught Major James, and the jealous Kyle Lance. Congratulations, congratulations. The future, sir. Kyle Lance approached Major James with mixed feelings in his heart, but he still pretended to congratulate him with a congratulatory expression. Haha. When Kyle Lance said this, Major James immediately grinned and laughed happily. Don't be so formal, I'm not right now. Your Excellency, I think you will have this day. Major James, who was about to smile crookedly, waved his hands politely, and said that he didn't mean it. Your Excellency, I still have something to do, I'm leaving first. Nodding to Kyle Lance, he said apologetically, you don't have to be so polite. I think such an important matter really needs to be shared with family and friends. You can go first. Kyle Lance shook his head indifferently, and said with a smile on the corner of his mouth. After receiving such a reply, Major James did not run in disregard of his image, upholding the etiquette of the nobility, but his fast walking speed was not much worse. In a short time, Kyle could not see Major James. Oh, my lord. Kyle Lance shook his head, muttering to himself with a wry smile. His eyes were gloomy. How difficult it is, for a minister like him who doesn't like the king and has nothing to do with him. Becoming a nobleman is just an unattainable dream. No, why don't you try? Suddenly, he remembered Thomas Cromwell, the minister of Henry VIII, who also became the Earl of Essex. Although he was executed in the end, it at least proved his attachment to the king. Can become aristocratic. I must become a nobleman. Kyle Lance broke his heart, and resolutely threw himself into the arms of a deep understanding of the king. First of all, he felt that Yin should have a deep understanding of the young king, then watch the dishes be reused in one fell swoop, and then win the attention of His Majesty, and finally become a nobleman. Just what to do. I first need to understand His Majesty's usual behavior. Thinking, Kyle made the first action. Looking at the guards in the distance, Kyle walked over slowly, and when he was about to say hello, he touched his pocket, but there was not a single shilling. This is embarrassing. Although he is a minister of the Privy Council, the king does not pay his salary, and he has no right to reap benefits. In addition, his background is just an ordinary squire, so how much money can he buy? The first action fails under the guard's puzzled eyes. Kyle casually walked past the guard and walked out of the palace. There is no impenetrable wall in the world, not to mention that it was Edward who said it himself. Under the spread of Major James, within an hour, the nobles in London had already known the news for half a day. The whole of London was rumored about it at this time. Major Dio, who came from France and surrendered to England, was drinking wine in the mansion with the middle-level generals who surrendered with him after arriving in London. Edward rewarded him with a house. Although it was in a wealthy area, it looked pretty good. However, since then, Major Dio has not seen the next move of the King of England. During the 10 days since he came to London, Major Dio was anxious in desperation. He could only find his former subordinates and drink together. Master, don't worry, my hundreds of acres of land have come down. It's near Huntington. I'm not far from you. Looking at his young master's frowning expression, Boris took a sip of his wine, said comfortingly, mine are all down. Your Baron Huntington must not be far away. Thank you for your comfort, Boris. Hearing what his servant said, Major Dio squeezed out a smile. Master, good news, your title has come down. The young manservant ran over quickly and said happily. Chapter 189, Conferment. Not to mention Major Dio's expression of surprise and unbearable surprise at that time, a group of French officers who surrendered next to him also showed expressions of envy and even jealousy at present. Being able to become an aristocrat is something common people dream of, even if you are given a minister or mayor title, which means hereditary land and privileges. As long as you have heirs, then your family will always be a nobleman, born with a higher status than those merchants, farmers, and craftsmen. When civilians meet you, they should bow and salute humbly, but you only need to hold your head high and nod your head gently after killing someone. You only need to pay a ransom. And you don't need to be punished. It can be said that even if you become a knight, then you can own the land and wealth passed down from generation to generation. If you're in England, then you'll find that having a knighthood is a reason to do anything. I don't know how many times I have said it. Since the Red and White Rose War in the last century, after the nobles committed suicide collectively, the nobles of England have completely become vassals of the royal power. Top nobles such as earls and dukes at the beginning of Edward's accession to the throne, except for the emerging foreign nobles such as the Duke of Somerset and the Duke of Houghton, there were only 1 duke and 9 earls left among the hereditary senior nobles. What is even more exaggerated is that by the time of Edward, there were only more than 200 knights left in the country, and you can imagine how many nobles and knights rose up during the War of the Roses, and how many nobles became extinct. This is also the era when the nobles succumbed to the king, and the power of the monarchy flourished during the Tudor dynasty. But it is different from the noble inheritance in Europa continent. The aristocrats in England are generally male first in inheritance. If there is no male heir, then find one from the family, and your daughter will not inherit your 1 penny property. This is common among the knight baron class, and it's not uncommon among high-ranking nobles, and the king will force you to perform it. Moreover, even if a woman inherits the title, according to the usual practice, the title cannot be passed on to the next generation. In other words, you cannot inherit the title by marrying the daughter of a fallen noble, or buy titles from the children of fallen nobles, like in the Europa continent. These are not allowed in England, so if you are not a nobleman, you will always be a commoner unless you are canonized by His Majesty the King. That's why local gentlemen flock to the House of Commons, where they regard it as a place to change their destiny. In the era of the Stuart dynasty, noble titles such as barons were invented and began to be sold to merchants. The merchants who obtained the titles linked up with the nobles who did business, thus becoming new nobles in the history books. Sent Charles I to the guillotine. Gossip aside, just under the expectation of everyone, Edward's first noble conferring ceremony after he inherited the throne officially arrived on this day. The entire palace of Westminster was full of excitement. The king's guards were wearing scarlet jackets and tall bearskin hats, standing majestically around them. The various nobles and members of parliament who participated in the ceremony also stood aside in well-dressed clothes, discussing something in whispers, and from time to time shot the few people standing in the middle with their eyes, and their eyes were full of envy. In the middle is the Earl of Wellington, who will be made a marquis this time on this great occasion. As a marquis, he wore a red velvet coat from the upper half, a hat trimmed with 3.5 rows of ermine, and a silver ring on his diadem with 4 gold leaves and 4 silver balls. This suit of clothes belongs exclusively to the Marquis, and cannot be surpassed by ordinary nobles. Standing behind Earl Wellington was Baron Smith. As the king's most trusted subject, Edward commended him and also showed other people who aspired to be loyal to the king. This is the benefit of working for the king. He will be canonized as a viscount this time. The viscount has the same clothes as the earl, except that there are 2.5 rows of mink on the hat, and a silver ring is added to the crown, decorated with 6 silver balls. And behind him, Major Dio was wearing a dark red velvet coat trimmed with white fur, a bonnet with 2 ermine fur seams, and a light silver horizontal line on the crown with 6 small silver balls. He was created a baron, which is the baron's clothes. Beside him, Major James was also dressed in the same way, and he looked extremely excited. While they were waiting, a guard on the side shouted loudly to many ministers and nobles, "By the grace of God, King of England, France, Scotland and Ireland, guardian of the faith, Edward, head of the Church of England and Ireland, His Majesty the VI has come to." With a long ending, Edward came out wearing a jewel-encrusted, castle-like crown, wearing a purple cloak, a short jacket inside, golden high-heeled shoes, and white stockings. It looks mighty. Actually, he feels terrible about himself. It's okay for a big man to wear high heels, but he also wears silk stockings. My God, but he can't do without it. This is the king's traditional clothes, otherwise the nobles will have to talk about it. "Good day, Your Majesty the King." The nobles and councillors immediately bowed and said respectfully, "Get up." Seeing Edward nodded, the guards on the side immediately shouted loudly, "Clatter, clatter." Then a voice sounded after that. Edward boarded the main stage in the middle, sharing the same position with Earl Wellington and others behind him, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Archbishop of York, together with the Duke of Houghton and the Earl of Southampton and other senior nobles and senior priests. Looked grand and magnificent. Earl Wellington felt nothing about this, but Baron Smith, Major James, Major Dio and others were sweating on their backs. Their hearts were intertwined with tension and excitement, and they didn't know what to do. "Lord Wellington," Edward called softly. Earl Wellington quickly took a step forward and half kneeled in front of Edward. The Earl of Wellington was so brave that he not only captured the city of Huntington, but also led a surprise attack to capture Edinburgh. Edward read aloud, announcing his achievements to the nobles and ministers. "In view of this, I canonize you as the Marquis of Edinburgh." Edward patted Earl Wellington's shoulders with his sword in his hand and said loudly. Immediately, there was a burst of applause and upsurge from below in this regard. Earl Wellington raised his head, blushed, and swore in a thick voice, "Under the witness of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I, my descendants, and those who inherit the title will always be loyal to you and your successors, and never repent." Edward nodded in satisfaction, then helped the newly promoted Marquis of Edinburgh up as usual, took his arm, and said loudly to the surrounding nobles and ministers, "This is my truly reliable and most respected partner. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190: The Seven Marys. The Earl of Wellington became the Marquis of Edinburgh, and Edward also gave him 3 small estates in Scotland under 1,000 acres, which did not make him the real master of Edinburgh. The next scene is basically the same. First, Edward calls the name of the person, then kneels down on one knee in front of Edward, and Edward reads his achievements. In the end, there is no such thing as what he said to the Marquis of Edinburgh. They are not worthy of the title. Baron Smith was named Viscount Sandell, and was rewarded by Edward with a castle and a 1,000-acre manor near the castle. Basically, he is not considered a court nobleman, but his territory is not as big as a baron, so the nobles still treat him like a court noble. And Major James was named Baron Belvoir, owning a castle and a manor with 800 acres of fertile land, which is a lot of property. And Major Dio was conferred the title of Baron Huntington by Edward, which is also a claim that it is only a manor with 1,000 acres of fertile land near Huntington, which is considered a favor. Don't underestimate the title of baron. Although the most nobles are barons, the titles and fiefs of barons are passed on through blood and marriage, and cannot be sold or transferred at will, and the kings of all dynasties did not increase or deprive the titles of nobles at will. For example, in 1387, Richard II added the title of baron for the first time, and by it Champeau de Holt was named Baron of Kidderminster. In the following hundreds of years, the Howard family has been a baron, rich and powerful for hundreds of years. Therefore, After this grand ceremony, the faces of the conferred people kept smiling happily, and they kept saying hello to the nobles and ministers around them. Among them, Major Dio was the most popular among the nobility. Others, such as Viscount Smith and Baron James, are both in their 30s and 40s, and they have already given birth to children. However, this Baron Dio from the Causselin family in France is currently still single, which is a potential stock. Besides, Major Dio is only in his 20s, he is considered young among nobles, and it is not a disadvantage to have married a daughter in the past. Moreover, even if you are 50 or 60 years old, just by virtue of your status as a baron, it is not a loss to have a wave of marriages. Therefore, compared with other people, Major Dio had the most densely populated people. 3 or 4 times as many as Smith and others. Seeing so many people around him, and asking about his age and marital status one by one, Major Dio understood that no matter how stupid he was, he had become a favorite. Looking at the crowded crowd in front of him, Major Dio thought silently, "It turns out that being popular is still an annoying thing." There was a wry smile in my heart, but the newly promoted Baron Causselin showed a smile on his face, and smiled and said hello to the nobles and ministers who came to say hello for some questions. Baron Dio also selectively answered and explained. After half an hour, he felt his face was stiff with a smile, and the crowd slowly receded. Baron Dio breathed out lightly in a corner where the crowd was sparse. For him, who came from France, these nobles and ministers must have a good relationship, and it is impossible to refuse directly. He will have to adapt to his interactions with nobles and ministers in the future. He is no longer the son of the Baron, who is dedicated to fighting. There was a bit of bitterness in the corner of Baron Dio's mouth. Then he turned his head and looked at the crowd in a circle, and took the first step. Just when Major Dio made up his mind to integrate into England, Edward had already left on his own. He knew that the next moment would be the time for the nobles to communicate. If he stayed, those ministers and nobles would be very cautious, so it was better not to stay. Besides, he didn't want to chat with this group of conservative nobles who had nothing to talk about at this time. In the garden behind Windsor Castle, the garden was full of fragrant flowers and green trees, and a group of noble women in England were having fun with smiles on their faces. An unknown bird stood on a branch, tilted its head, and looked curiously at the group of huge monsters in front of it. It didn't take long to see them showing bloody mouths, enough to wrap it in one bite, and it frightened. It hurriedly flapped its wings and moved away. Location: but the behemoth in the eyes of the birds is the Queen Mother Mary, brought by Edward from Edinburgh, his sisters Princess Elizabeth and Princess Mary, and the restless little lolly. Expensive high-grade linen cloth dyed with patterns was spread casually on the grass, and the maids bent over and stood aside to serve them. Various fruits and flowers were placed on the linen cloth spread on the ground, as well as cooked and cut into pieces. Quick golden brown roast chicken. Influenced by Edward, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Mary liked to eat fruit raw instead of cooked like other nobles. Princess Mary is wearing a white long dress with golden lace, light red moccasin boots on her feet, and a string of golden necklaces around her neck, but she is lying on the linen without any image, squinting, looking at the sky with white clouds. I don't know what I'm thinking about. Little Lolita was wearing pink pajamas and a bow tie. Together with the other 4 Marys, she was running around in the garden, wanting to pick beautiful flowers when she saw them, looking extremely happy. The maid, Casey, followed closely, looking at the cheerful little Lolita with a smile on her lips. Princess Mary, who was wearing a light blue dress, and Queen Mary, who was wearing a white dress, sat on the linen cloth dignifiedly, chatting happily next to each other. Elizabeth lay on the linen cloth with a bored expression on her face, pouted her mouth, and looked at Princess Mary and Queen Mary, who were chatting, looking at the 2 people with joy. Elizabeth frowned. What is there to talk about Roman doctrine? I'm so bored. I don't know what Edward is doing at this time. Thinking about it, Elizabeth pulled out a long weed with roots from the grass, and stared blankly at it. Suddenly, she heard some topics that interested her. Your Highness, you are so beautiful, gentle and considerate. I think whoever marries you in this world is truly blessed by God. The Queen Mother looked at the gentle Princess Mary and said with a smile. Upon hearing such a sentence, Princess Mary's eyes dimmed immediately. She turned her head and looked into the distance with a listless expression. Oh, Your Royal Highness, don't be sad. Believe me, for a beautiful princess like you, the omnipotent Lord will definitely arrange for it. Seeing Princess Mary's expression, Queen Mary, who knew she had said something wrong, hastily added, I hope so. Princess Mary suddenly became less talkative, pursed her lips, and said lightly. Chapter 191, His Majesty the Fallen King. As Edward's older sister, Princess Mary was born in 1516 and is now 33 years old. In China in the 21st century, She is already an older leftover woman, and her chances of getting married are slim, but you have to know that this is in the Middle Ages, an era when you can marry someone who is your grandmother for family property. As long as you have money, then you don't have to worry about marrying. In fact, regarding the marriage of his sister, Princess Mary, Edward was also at a loss and had a headache when Edward first came to the throne. The best candidate was Maximilian, a young man who would become the King of Austria in the future. He was not only well educated, but he had no conflicts with England, and he would not have to embarrass Princess Mary in the future. However, in 1548, Maximilian married Maria, the daughter of King of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, reigned 1530 to 1556. At that time, Charles V was also Maximilian's father Ferdinand's brother, that is, Maximilian's uncle. In other words, this is a marriage between cousins, too heavy taste. But Edward looked back. If Princess Mary married him, and Princess Mary was his cousin according to seniority, it would be a bit unacceptable. Moreover, people in Germany and other regions believed in Protestantism at that time, and Princess Mary believed in Catholicism. If she was forced to marry the prince of a Protestant country, then this marriage would be tragic. So the best candidate at the moment is Prince Philip, the son of the King of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who is the cousin of Princess Mary. Although they are also relatives, the blood relationship is also far away. However, if they get married, I am afraid that the Spaniards will not want it. You must know that Princess Mary is 11 years older than Philip. The reason why the two can marry in history is because Princess Mary is the Queen of England. Annexation of England, that's why it succeeded. However, Edward's body is not bad now. After several years of exercise, he is not much different from ordinary people. Besides, in order to maintain his health, he didn't even touch the maid beside him. He was 13 years old and still a virgin. Oh my God. In this era when the average life expectancy is only 13 years old, the maids around those young nobles have already picked countless times at this time, and no one believes that a majestic King of England is still a virgin. However, this is the truth. Edward kept emphasizing in his heart. Suddenly, a flash of lightning flashed in Edward's mind. Wait, even ordinary nobles don't know my current physical condition, and Charles V probably doesn't know it either. Edward looked up at the painting of angels in the palace, and thought silently in his heart, since history proves that the two of them will be married, it is very necessary for me to fulfill them. When he came back to his senses, Edward nodded to himself. For the sake of his sister's happiness, it was nothing to lose some reputation. Emma, who was following Edward, looked at His Majesty the King, who was thinking with sparkling eyes, with an expression of reverence on her face. Suddenly, she saw His Majesty the King frowning, and then saw his right hand suddenly touching his chest. Breathing rapidly, feeling a little breathless, Emma hurried over. At this time, Edward was half kneeling on the ground with a hideous expression. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Emma kept calling out as she put the king's head on her huge chest. At this moment, Edward felt that his head was resting on a soft warm meat, and he felt so comfortable that he wanted to cry out, but for the sake of his sister, he still held back. His eyes slightly opened to slit, and his whole body was trembling. Looking at the big-breasted guard in front of him, Edward said in a trembling voice, "Call the doctor." With that said, Edward lay in Emma's arms with great acting spirit, his eyes tightly closed. This frightened the girl so much that her face paled and her lips turned pale. Quickly, carry His Majesty to the room, Emma said to the female guard beside her while hugging Edward. Go and inform the imperial doctor and invite him to the palace. Emma ordered the two silly male guards beside her, her tone hurried in this regard. The two did not hesitate for a moment, turned around and walked out of the palace, and Edward was carefully carried by Emma and another female guard, and slowly placed on the velvet bed in the bedroom, where he was lying down. Later, the nobles and ministers who were celebrating the exchange also got the news, and they were shocked. The whole celebration venue was like a mess. People hurriedly boarded their carriages and rushed to Whitehall Palace, and the news quickly spread to Windsor Castle, and Emma was standing by the bed at this time, looking at His Majesty the King, who was frowning and trembling from time to time, with a worried expression on his face. After a while, Emma suddenly found that His Majesty the King had opened his eyes, and rushed over in surprise. Just as he was about to yell, Edward suddenly covered her lips with his left hand, then wrapped her right hand around her waist, lifted it up, and immediately the girl came to the bed. Looking at the girl with a face full of surprises, Edward directly put his lips against her soft red lips, nibbling on them kissingly. The girl's eyes were full of surprise, but she didn't take any measures to resist, allowing Edward to take advantage of her. After a while, just when the girl felt that she couldn't breathe, Edward let go of her. I'm fine, just follow my orders, Edward said softly, looking at the blushing girl. Immediately, the girl shyly climbed out of the bed, blushed, lowered her head, and gave a soft "N, go and guard the door, and don't let anyone in except the imperial doctor." Edward commanded in a deep voice to several guards with shocked faces. Yes. A few guards nodded, expressing their understanding instantly, then walked out and closed the door. "Go and call Guy, Commander Guy, do you know?" Edward asked the girl. "I know." Emma was a little confused, and after hearing Edward's order, she hurried out, lowering her head, a little embarrassed to see him. Edward couldn't help smiling, feeling a little satisfied with taking advantage of him, and finally worthy of his acting skills. After a while, there was a rush of footsteps, and Edward heard two female voices talking to the guards. After thinking for a while, he thought it was Sister Lucy Luna, and said loudly, "Then they come in." Sure enough, after the door opened, Sisters Lucy and Luna rushed in directly. The two circled around Edward to check. Their eyes were hazy with tears, and they looked like flower buds hit by rain, making them very cute. Okay, this is just my trick, don't worry." Seeing the two crying, Edward had to coax them. Chapter 192 Seville. After Edward said a word in a soft voice, he didn't say another word for the king. Being able to coax the maid a little bit is already a rare situation, and this is also because Sisters Lucy and Luna grew up with him, otherwise he would not want to keep a low voice. Sister Lucy was also sensible, so she checked and found that Edward was fine, then patted her chest and recovered afterwards. Nobles came to see him one after another, but Edward refused them one by one. After calling the imperial doctor, he asked him to keep his mouth shut and just say nothing. The imperial doctor walked out of the bedroom, faced the questioning of the nobles, withstood the pressure, and said nothing, and this just verified the biggest guess in the hearts of the nobles. And the leader of the Dark Blade, Guy, also obeyed Edward's order, and publicized Edward's condition in Spain, as serious as it was. Using the huge intelligence system, let the King of Spain know that his son needs a wife. After that, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Mary also rushed over with worried faces, and came to see Edward in a hurry. Edward was still a little moved by this, to be honest. Before Edward was born, Princess Mary was originally the first heir to the throne of England. Her mother was the aunt of King Charles V of Spain, known as Catherine of Aragon. At the age of 9 she was named Princess of Wales, which is the title of a prince, but the good times didn't last long. Catherine divorced Henry VIII, and she was rejected by Henry VIII and refused to admit her position as heir. Princess Elizabeth's mother, Queen Anne, was finally executed. She was directly called the illegitimate daughter by Henry VIII, and could only be called Miss Elizabeth Tudor. When Edward's mother Jane Seymour became queen, she let the two princesses live in the palace and improved their environment. In the end, it was Queen Catherine who completely thawed the relationship between their father and daughter. Even after Henry VIII died, their names appeared among the heirs. The two of them stayed in the palace after Edward was born, and Henry VIII made them become Edward's maids to serve him exclusively. It can be said that Edward was brought up by the two of them, and it is not normal to have no feelings for this. Edward couldn't be like coaxing the maids. He almost exhausted his whole body, and he didn't know how many times he explained it before reassuring the two princesses, but the little Lolita was being kept from the truth, showing no affection at all at this time. Outside Whitehall Palace, London, York, Southampton, these places intermittently circulated the news that the king was ill. Generally speaking, it was well controlled by Edward and did not cause any disturbances. However, in Spain, Edward's illness spread throughout Spain overnight after Dark Blade's publicity in various bars in Spain. Seville, located in the south of the Iberian Peninsula, in the valley of the lower reaches of the Guadalquivir River, relies on its excellent geographical location, and it has become the only port of call for Spanish treasure ships in Spain, swallowing up boatloads of gold and silver from the Americas every day, and then absorbing huge luxury goods from all over the world. Seville has created a scene of prosperity for the common people. Prosperity is nothing more than a chance to breathe in order to maintain a huge army and navy, and to satisfy the luxurious life of the royal family and nobles. Charles I imposed heavier and heavier taxes on ordinary civilians. The reason why Spain has not yet broken out of riots is that the gold ships returning from the Americas and the merchant ships satisfying the nobles' luxuries are coming in a steady stream, continuously renewing Spain's life. The second is because Catholicism firmly controls the minds of the Spaniards and stifles their sense of riot. Spain currently has two capitals, Toledo in the Kingdom of Castile and Zaragoza in the Kingdom of Aragon, but Charles V preferred Madrid and spent most of his time there relying on the inland river. Gold and silver from Seville were continuously sent to Madrid, making this central city begin to prosper relying on the business of the royal family and nobles. Seville is currently a well-known and prosperous city in Europe. A gold ship from South America slowly stopped in Seville. Later, the royal family dispatched court personnel with labor to count the gold and silver on the ship one by one, but the sailors on the ship disembarked directly, ran to the nearest tavern, and began a period of drunkenness and dreams. After several months of driving on the sea, the pockets of the level people are already bulging, and they urgently need to vent, and the tavern is the best place to vent. 3 or 5 groups of sailors wore stinky clothes and came to the largest tavern in the port with smiles on their faces. This is also a place frequented by sailors. Cass is one of them. To be honest, if it wasn't for those nobles who tax too much, he wouldn't have left home and become a member of the sailors composed of rogues and rascals. If the arrangement had been followed, he would have already had a big butt and a strong. There are several wives and sons. It's not like now, in his 20s, still a bachelor, and he doesn't know when he will go to see God. Cass touched the scar on his face, thinking bitterly. Walking into the tavern, Cass didn't carry the smiling woman upstairs like everyone else, but found a place to sit down and drink by himself, feeling the popularity. He hadn't seen so many people in a few months, so he adjusted. Have you heard? The King of England is critically ill. Tisk tisk tisk. A brawny man with bare breasts exclaimed to his drinking companion. Hey, I heard it a long time ago. If the little king can't hold on, then his sister will inherit the throne. I heard that his sister is not married yet. A drunk man hiccuped and his eyes lit up. Hearing this, Cass' eyes also glowed red. Well, if I marry her, I might become a king. But after a while, he remembered his identity, a poor and depraved sailor. Stop daydreaming. Taking a sip of the wine, Cass directly hugged the service girl who passed the wine everywhere in the darkness behind him, put it on his shoulders and ran upstairs. He felt that there was an evil fire in his heart, and he didn't want to vent it uncomfortable, and the service girl on the shoulder didn't struggle. Instead she laughed non-stop. Dude, don't push so hard. You hurt me. As a result, Cass felt even more uncomfortable, and his pace became faster and faster. Cass was not the only one who was full of anger. In a castle near Madrid, the future King of Spain, son of Charles I, Prince Philip, was also full of anger. As the son of Charles I and the heir to the Spanish throne, Prince Philip is also an ambitious figure, and the love of power has penetrated into his bones. Guess what he heard today? The King of England is dying. The first heir, Princess Mary, is not yet married. Oh my God. This is truly God's best gift to Spain. Prince Philip walked quickly, thinking excitedly. Chapter 193. Marriage. Thinking that he might rule England in the future, his dream of dominating the world took a bigger step. In the future, Prince Philip will be like Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty in Chinese history. He defeated France, made the Ottoman Empire slump at sea, and annexed Portugal. During the period of Philip II, historians often refer to this period as the hegemony of the Habsburg dynasty. Europe, Spain reached its heyday in his hands, but later, his invincible fleet was defeated by England, and the Netherlands broke away from the rule of Spain. Unfortunately, after his death, there was no Emperor Juan of the Han Dynasty to strengthen the country for him, and Spain inevitably began to decline. It is undeniable that he is an ambitious and talented figure. Philip, who was immersed in the activities in his heart, did not go to the maids and guards who were saluting on the road, and ran directly to the room of his father Charles I. His Royal Highness, please wait a moment. The guard guarding the door saw that His Royal Highness was coming, and hurriedly bowed down and Philip nodded lightly. The guards didn't dare to delay, so they walked in quickly, bent down to Charles I, who was still discussing with the palace minister, and said softly, Your Majesty, Prince Philip, please see me. When Charles I, who was dealing with the palace minister, heard the words, he raised his head and glanced at the guard, who lowered his head to report. His brows frowned, and then disappeared. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister. Wait a moment. Charles I said to the smiling palace prime minister with a blank expression on his face. Yes. The palace minister's eyebrows were a little wide, and he looked a little older, but Charles I was still very cautious when he was young. Tell him to come in. Charles I looked at the guards and ordered casually. The guard was instructed, raised his head, and hurried out of the room. Soon, Prince Philip walked in slowly. Good day, my father. Philip bowed to greet Charles I, and then saw the palace minister again. Good day, my lord. The palace. Good day, your Royal Highness. Guanglian quickly stood up and bowed to Prince Philip. Father, have you heard? The little King of England is sick. Prince Philip looked at Charles I modestly and asked respectfully. Yes, I heard that he was seriously ill, but unfortunately he survived in the end. Charles I said non-committally, then looked at his son with a smile in his eyes, and asked, Why? Are you interested in England? After being ill for a day, Edward recovered automatically, and the news spread that his body was just weak. The common people may not know it, but he knows that the King of England's body is indeed fragile every day, and he may not have a chance to see God in a few years. These are no secrets to Charles I. Faced with his father's question, Prince Philip knew that he was asking about Princess Mary's age, so he would think for a moment. He nodded without hesitation, looked at Charles I with piercing eyes, and said affirmatively, "Yes, father, England it is essential for us, at least, it can bring a French crown to our Habsburg family, can't it?" "That's right. The French crown? This is indeed a pleasant thing." Thinking of this, Charles I laughed loudly, and the whole person suddenly became excited at this moment. He couldn't help but think of his old enemy, the rogue King Francois I of France. If he heard the news, he would probably be furious. "Philip, if you don't mind, I agree to this matter." Charles I looked at his handsome son, nodded in satisfaction, and exclaimed, "Yes, father, it is my dream to own a French crown." Prince Philip's eyes were bright, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. Afterwards, Charles I turned his deep gaze to the Prime Minister beside him. The gray-haired Prime Minister bowed his waist, noticed Charles I's gaze, and nodded quickly. "Your Majesty, your Royal Highness, I will get it done as soon as possible." The Prime Minister replied respectfully, "If there is nothing serious about some conditions, just agree to it. Some small profits are not as important as a crown." Charles I told his palace minister slowly, "Did he know that the current Princess Mary is a favorite, and this marriage will not be so easy to succeed without paying anything? What you pay now is to get more in the future. Yes, follow your instructions." The old palace minister bowed his head again, expressing his understanding. In less than a day, the Spanish court quickly drew up candidates and sent envoys to England to propose marriage. 2 days later, Edward met the envoy in his own Whitehall palace. A man in his 30s, wearing a red cloak and leaning on a cane, saluted Edward respectfully. "Your Majesty the King, His Majesty King Charles V specially sent me to check on your physical condition. Seeing that you are fine, I think it is God's blessing." The emissary named Moya Flores Diaz had a surprised expression after seeing Edward, as if he was happy for his recovery. "I am very honored to receive the condolences from His Majesty Charles V. I am in good health. Please thank him for me." Edward showed a forced smile, nodded slightly to the messenger, and said softly, "Therefore, in the eyes of the messenger, the King of England was indeed seriously ill, and his good health was just an excuse." Therefore, he became more determined than his heart, determined that Edward's time was short, and made up his mind to fulfill His Majesty's entrustment and obtain this marriage for His Royal Highness. "Messenger, do you have anything else to do?" Looking at the Spaniard who was still standing still, Edward asked curiously. "Your Majesty, to be honest, my king sent me here, and I have another happy event to propose to you." The Spanish envoy bent over and said enthusiastically, "Oh." Edward showed a puzzled expression, then looked at him and said, "I heard that Her Royal Highness Princess Mary of your country is outstanding in talent and appearance, virtuous and gentle, and my prince has admired her for a long time, so I propose to Her Royal Highness on behalf of your prince." The Spaniard raised his head, his expression was flying, and he said sharply at the corner of his mouth, "This." Edward showed a thoughtful look, hesitating. "Let me think about it. Marriage is a big deal, don't be careless, Your Majesty. His Royal Highness is quite sincere." As he said that, the Spaniard showed an expression that you understand, and Edward's face became serious at this moment. "Your Royal Highness is so sincere, I don't want to interrupt this beautiful marriage." Edward sighed. "Your Excellency, Your Majesty." Sir John stepped out in an instant, bowing and saluting. "You and this emissary have a careful, earnest discussion about the specifics of the marriage between the two countries." Facing Sir John, Edward said seriously, his eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Chapter 194. Queen Catherine. Sir John stayed in Scotland for about a month, and then came back suddenly, which surprised Edward a little. Could it be that the Scottish Reformation was so fast? In this regard, Sir John explained in this way: the Scottish nobles directly divided all the property of the Catholic Church before the start, and the income of His Majesty the King has been sorted out by him, and roughly sorted out. Edward couldn't help but think, compared with England, the nobles in Scotland are more powerful, and each noble has its own territory. There is no way to start the whole country like England, and the nobles can only do their own thing. As for the success of the religious reform, Edward didn't have the slightest worry. Those nobles had long coveted the property of the Catholic Church. Now that they have such a big name, how can they hold back their hands? Of course, the Catholic Church is not a vegetarian either. It has been accumulated for hundreds of years, and the power of the nobles is too scattered, and some nobles will even be defeated by the Catholic Church, forming a seesaw. This is exactly what Edward wanted. When the two fight each other, he will take advantage of it. This idea is not too beautiful. When Sir John returned to London, Edward thought he might be of some use, and kept him with him for future use. Sure enough, with the arrival of the Spanish envoy today, Sir John is the most suitable negotiator because he loves money and does not suffer losses. I thought silently in my heart, but Edward's footsteps did not stop. Behind her are beautiful and attractive female guards. Edward admires them as she walks, which is pleasing to the eye. Should I build a beautiful guard army like the North African Emperor Gata, so that I can match my identity? An idea popped up in Edward's mind. Edward wore wool fur boots made of high-quality leather, with embroidered patterns on the surface. In London in July, the feet were not easy to get wet, and they were not stuffy, and they were a bit stiff when walking. Edward slowly came to Princess Mary's exclusive room in Whitehall Palace. At this time, the originally quiet room became lively. At this time, Queen Mary, Princess Mary, Princess Elizabeth, and the married Queen Catherine stayed together at this time, competing for beauty. The scene was extremely pleasing to the eye. I saw that Queen Catherine, who already had a daughter, was radiant at this time, with a loving smile on her face, and wearing a long skirt with lace skirts. Even in the past 2 years, her noble lady temperament still made people awe-inspiring. At this time, Queen Catherine's ending was very different from that in history, and it was even infinitely better originally. Her life trajectory was that after marrying Edward's uncle Thomas Seymour, she died of puerperal fever after giving birth to a daughter named Mary Seymour in August 1548 last year. But Edward's forgiving attitude made them get better sooner, and let them have a baby 2 months earlier. Naturally, puerperal fever did not occur, and the mother and daughter were safe, but the daughter's name was still Mary Seymour. Fate is so magical. Edward couldn't help sighing walking into the room. The maid who guarded the door held up the corner of her skirt to salute, but she didn't mean to stop her. But his arrival made the whole room lively. Catherine, it's been a long time. You're still so beautiful. Edward saw Catherine sitting in the middle, with a smile on his lips, and said to her, bending slightly, Your Majesty. Seeing His Majesty the King's arrival, everyone stood up and held up the corners of their skirts, bowing their knees forward to salute your welcome. We are all a family, so we don't need so much etiquette. Edward nodded and smiled as he looked at the saluting crowd. Edward's words are not wrong either. The Queen Mother Mary is his mother-in-law, and Catherine married his uncle and became his aunt. Not to mention Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth. Everyone in this room is a family. Your Majesty, I haven't seen you for a few days. You look even more majestic and handsome. At first glance, I thought you were some handsome and heroic knight. Catherine looked at the Sworn King with delicate and healthy skin. Smiling and sighing, Catherine, I haven't seen you for a long time. Why don't you get together often? Edward found a seat and sat down, looking at the former queen with a full chest and a loving face. He couldn't help complaining. That's right. We haven't seen you for a long time. Elizabeth, who was sitting on a chair with a ring of jewelry around her neck in a ladylike manner, now showed a lively temperament and said in a coquettish tone. Princess Mary on the side also looked at the former queen with doubts. Since Catherine married Henry VIII, it not only promoted the relationship between Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth and Henry VIII, and even allowed them to officially enter the palace as princesses, but also continued to take care of them. Elizabeth and Edward, who lacked maternal love, grew up under Catherine's upbringing, especially Princess Elizabeth, who almost regarded her as her own mother. Regarding such inquiries, Catherine smiled helplessly, and said softly, I also want to come and see you. But I really can't do without my daughter. She has been suffering from minor illnesses since she was born, so how can I rest assured? Let's go. Princess Elizabeth and Princess Mary let her go, with sympathy in their eyes. In this era of high mortality rate, at any time, a child will leave, and being a parent is painful. Mary, the King of Spain sent someone to propose to me, saying that he wants you to marry Prince Philip. Edward saw that the atmosphere was a little sad, and then changed the subject. Hearing that the topic was suddenly brought up to her, and it was about marriage, Princess Mary couldn't help but blushed. She felt a little embarrassed in front of so many people. The others also calmed down at this time, looking at Princess Mary with a smile on their lips, while Catherine and Princess Elizabeth hugged Princess Mary directly and teased her in her ear. To everyone's surprise, Princess Mary just showed a faint smile, and said to his younger brother, the King of England, What do you mean? Edward did not guess this sentence for a while, and waited up and said, I think Prince Philip is not bad. The Habsburg family is relatively rich, and is the only son of Charles V, Prince Philip must inherit the throne, and Mary you will be queen too." Looking at his sister's bright eyes, Edward analyzed each word, and the others nodded. "This is indeed a satisfying marriage in that case, then I'll marry in Spain." After listening to Princess Mary, she thought about it for a while, and felt that the marriage was okay. She didn't have to pick and choose at her age, as long as she was suitable. Chapter 195, Alliance Established. Seeing Princess Mary nodding in agreement, Edward felt relieved. "Catherine, talk slowly, I won't bother you." Edward looked around. He was the only man, a little embarrassed, then nodded and said immediately. Edward glanced sideways and saw Queen Mary's disgusted expression dissipate slightly, and the corners of his mouth twitched. It seemed that this woman was still dissatisfied with taking her captive. "Congratulations to your majesty," a clear or gentle or pleasant voice sounded, and Edward walked out of the room. After walking out of the room, he could still faintly hear the voices talking about Prince Philip. After that, Edward went to meet Kyle Lands, Minister of the Privy Council. "Your Excellency, how much did the French pay for Francisco?" Edward sat on a chair covered with the wolf fur, half lying down, eyes closed, and asked lazily this. Kyle felt a little speechless. He knew that the king would not be satisfied with this answer, so he moved his lips and hesitated. He looked at His Majesty the King seriously, and when he realized that the king's eyelids blinked a little after hearing these words, he blurted out, "Your Majesty, the French are only willing to pay £6,000 to redeem Francisco. Besides, I also heard that the King of France began to borrow heavily. I guess he was not sincere in our negotiations. I'm afraid they are planning to take it back with the army." Looking up at His Majesty the King, who was dozing off, Kyle made a guess, trying to redeem his lost points in front of the king. Although it was useless, how would you know if you didn't try? Regarding this matter, Edward also had a little guess in his heart. The sincerity of the French is there. According to Henry II's character, it is impossible to succumb to England. What's more, he lost the previous naval battle. In order to re-establish the king's authority, he must use a victory to win. After all, there are still a large number of nobles in France. Although they cannot compete with a king individually, they can overthrow the king together. What is more ridiculous is that the War of the Roses led to the centralization of monarchy in England, and France, 100 years later, also began to centralize power in the late 16th century after a religious civil war. War is really a good thing, Edward thought for a while, and felt that it was impossible for Francisco to hold on, so he could only give up. It's not that he underestimated himself. England really couldn't beat France at this time. France's annual tax revenue reached £1 million, 4 times that of England. A lot of money cannot only hire a large number of powerful Swiss mercenaries, but he can also call a large number of knights. If the cost is not considered, the French king can call more than 100,000 troops to fight at one time. The huge army can crush England in sheer numbers. Therefore, the best policy is to give up Francisco, otherwise the loss outweighs the gain. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed in Edward's head, and he thought of a provocative plan. "You continue to talk to the French, hold them steady, and go down first." Edward waved at Kyle. Kyle also looked at Edward with doubts, and then slowly backed away. Half an hour later, Sir John walked in with sweat on his forehead, and bowed to greet him. "Good day, Your Majesty." "Oh." Looking at Sir John in a hurry, Edward asked suspiciously, "Is the result out?" He couldn't help but be puzzled. How could the negotiation be so fast? It was just a matter of eating a meal. It was too easy. Hey. Hearing this, Sir John had a smirk on his face, his eyes narrowed, and his beard trembled. "Your Majesty, the Spaniards seem to want a quick victory, and they quickly gave in to some interests." Next, Sir John cheerfully explained to Edward. First of all, this time the two countries formally established an alliance, limited to France, agreeing that when the other side is attacked, both sides need to send troops to support and harass at the request of England if necessary. Spain was willing to block the French army from going out of the Mediterranean, and if the two countries reached an alliance before, the Venetian navy hired by the French would be stopped in Gibraltar and unable to get out of the Mediterranean. In other words, from now on, even if the French hire or build a navy, if the Spaniards block it, the French will not be able to directly hit the island of Great Britain. Of course, to be honest, Princess Mary's marriage is a political marriage, which was doomed after she was born and cannot be changed. The rest are some commercial interests, that is, small profits in the mouth of the Spaniards. For example, English woolen textiles are allowed to enter Spain and its affiliated territories, such as the Netherlands, Austria, and South American colonies. This is a large market. It also banned French textiles from entering Spain. This was to curb the development of the French textile industry. Appropriate tax reductions, or exemptions, for some British goods for the Spaniards. These are indeed small profits. After all, hundreds of treasure ships are transported from South America every year. It doesn't matter whether the money is bought by the French or the English, as long as it can satisfy the enjoyment of the nobles. The money that the Spanish and Portuguese labored so hard to bring from South America was not used to promote commerce, but to enjoy it, and instead promoted the development of England and France. Of course, the treaty also stipulates that England shall not invade Spain's interests in South America. That is to say, England is not allowed to establish colonies in South America. Edward didn't care about this. At present, England does not have the energy to colonize, and after defeating Spain, it can just accept what is ready-made, and there is no need to work hard to develop. The most important thing is to establish the alliance between Spain and England, and Spain has given up some commercial interests for England. This treaty could protect England from French harassment for a few years, and it would also squeeze out the French and enjoy most of the Spanish market. These were enough to allow England's commerce to take off and capitalism to set sail. Yes, that's right. In Edward's eyes, the duration of this treaty is a few years. If Spain is too powerful at any time, then the other side of the alliance is France. Some people say that this is not good for Princess Mary's marriage. In fact, this does not affect the marriage at all, because the country is the country, the royal family is the royal family, the country is fighting lively in front, but the royal family communicates constantly. This is Europe at this time. Marriage and war are the themes. Moreover, don't forget that Princess Mary's mother is Charles V's aunt, and Princess Mary is Charles V's cousin. She is actually one of the heirs of Spain, but the order is relatively low. Chapter 196 Team Leader. N. Edward listened roughly for a while, and found that England's benefits were not bad, and he was quite satisfied. Your Excellency, let's sign this treaty. Yes. Your Majesty, follow your instructions. Hearing what the king said, Sir John nodded his approval with joy on his face. Go and see the situation in the royal family's territory. Report to me when you come back. Edward waved his hand and said lazily. Seeing His Majesty the King like this, Sir John took a look, and then stepped back softly, leaving His Majesty the lazy alone, half reclining in his chair. Edward pondered the consequences of the alliance with Spain, and how long it would last. Thinking about it, Edward decided that he could let France and Spain play a wave while England was recuperating, and they could not be allowed to rest in. Let's do it, Edward said with affirmation after rubbing his nose with bright eyes. The next day, Edward held a small ceremony. In the name of the King of France, he conferred the title of Princess Mary as Earl of Francisco, whose territory is the city of Francisco according to the marriage between the two countries. 1 month later, that is, on August 10th, Princess Mary will marry Spain. As a dowry, the city of Francisco is also included. Regarding this matter, the Spaniards were indifferent, and Edward couldn't figure out what Charles V was up to. However, King Henry VIII of France jumped to his feet angrily, declaring his legal right to the French throne, and that the Tudor royal family had no right to inherit the French throne. So Edward's canonization of the city of Francisco was unreasonable for this kind of verbal battle. Edward is too lazy to fight, and has no time to waste saliva. Anyway, Edward has always claimed that he is the King of France, whether you admit it or not. On this regard, Henry VIII accelerated the pace of recruiting troops, and wanted to recapture Francisco as quickly as possible. Due to the establishment of the Anglo-Spanish alliance, England's goods were exported to Spain in large quantities, which made the whole of London extraordinarily prosperous. Clean and tidy alleys, spacious streets, rows of shops, and orderly crowds. This is London. Half a year after the establishment of the city government, crowds of all kinds walked shoulder to shoulder on the endlessly flowing streets, and some people stopped from time to time. In front of the peddlers hawking along the street, the large carriage drawn by 6 horses was running smoothly on the erected rails, and the spacious space could accommodate more than 10 people. The carriage stopped slowly after a certain distance, and at a place with a plaque. The queue that had been lined up in advance couldn't wait to get on the carriage. Among them, after paying 2 pennies for a well-dressed gentleman or a beautiful lady, they can build a relatively clean small workshop that can accommodate 4 people. However, ordinary people only need to pay a penny to sit in the ordinary workshop. There are 8 seats here, and including standing people, it can accommodate 16 people sitting in a horse-drawn carriage. You only need to pay for all the journeys at the beginning, and there is no need to pay additionally. This is indeed a convenient and cheap means of transportation for ordinary people. This is the railroad carriage that Edward painstakingly invented thanks to the several months of renovation by the London city government. The spacious London street has enough space to install rails. This is the biggest trace of Edward's traveller. It is said to be rails, but it is actually just wood-clad iron. In this era when iron materials are used as war reserves, it is indeed a waste to spend a lot of iron to build this thing. Of course, it is also possible to cause it because England is rich in iron ore, and most countries don't have the energy to do it. This is when Edward recalled his memory and used the remaining knowledge to remind those blacksmiths to use blast furnaces to make iron. After the efficiency is doubled, it can be used to make things other than weapons. Like a local tyrant regarding the changes brought about by himself, Edward often stayed in the palace, and he did not conduct any private tours in microservices, so he did not understand deeply enough. But for Ham, who lives in London, the changes in this year were enough to surprise him from ear to ear since the last time he followed a dock boss to participate in the road repair and reconstruction campaign organized by the London city government, thanks to the good impression he made on a staff member of the London government. He no longer worked as a dock worker, but went to eat the salary of the government. Due to Edward's request, the city management office of the City of London set up a health department, and he was honored to be an employee of the health department, a hygienist. That is, street sweepers. His full-time job is to clean the streets and clean up the garbage in the garbage pool on time, and his jurisdiction is the 400 household districts around his home. Although it is very tiring, the job is very stable. It is not like dock workers who depend on the sky for their livelihood. When there are more ships, they earn more, and when there are fewer ships, they earn less, or even no money. It is different when he is a hygienist. His monthly salary is 4 shillings, 48 pence. This money can not only feed all the family members, but also has a monthly surplus, which can be used to help relatives from time to time, or buy a piece of cloth to make new clothes for the children. Holding a big broom, Ham wore a grey singlet, and when he saw the stolen place, he went to sweep it, which was his duty. When Ham was happily thinking about whether he would have an extra meal in the evening, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Ham, Ham. Hearing his name, Ham turned around and saw that it was the staff of the head of the 100 Houses district, Lemire. Mr. Mill, what can I do for you? Ham put down the broom in his hand, walked over with a silly smile, and spoke respectfully. Seeing that Ham finally came to his senses, Lemire said amusedly, Ham, what are you thinking? I have called you several times, but there is no response. Ham's mouth was dumb. He didn't know what to say. He could only respond with a smirk. Okay, I'll let you know. Before dinner tonight, let the person in charge of your group's family come to Mr. District Chief. There is something to announce. Lemire knew that he couldn't ask anything, so he didn't wait for him, and went straight to him. Said without taking a breath, understood, I will let them all go before dinner. Ham nodded honestly, patted his chest to assure N. Lemire nodded after hearing the assurance, and then prepared to leave. He still had several people to inform him, so there was no time to waste. Go slowly. Ham bowed and bid farewell to the young employee. After London was divided into 100 household districts and 1,000 household districts, each district had a mayor, a tax collector, and a magistrate. There are 4 people working under the head of the district, and the young man just now is one of them, so Ham treats him with great respect. It is said that it is a 100 household district. Some 100 household districts have hundreds of households with a population of 500 or 600 people, while others have only 80 or 90 households with a population of 400 to 500. How can 4 people manage a district? Therefore, the team leader came into being. The team leader has no establishment and no salary, and is elected by a dozen families. Ham is also elected as the team leader because he is a health worker and eats from the government. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197. Ham is very happy to be the team leader. It is the first time for his ancestors to be an official for 5 or 6 generations. This is a rare experience. Although there is no salary for being a team leader, you can be a leader. Therefore, since the title of team leader was added to his head, Ham felt that he could walk with strength, and he was much younger and more face-saving. After sweeping up the last rubbish on the street, Ham inspected more than 20 streets in the 400 household districts, and found that the garbage pools and the streets were clean and there was no rubbish, so he went back with confidence and went to work. The team leader's buddy, when he came near his home, Ham slowly puffed up his chest and swaggered, looking like a group leader. Of course, this is what he thinks, and what other people think, too. It's very prestigious. The girls and boys along the street cast envious glances at him, which greatly satisfied Ham's vanity, and made Ham, who had bowed his head for decades, very happy. Looking ahead, Ham saw his neighbor Raoul came back panting. Ham looked up, and saw that the sun had turned yellow and the sky was getting dark, so he hurriedly completed the task. Raoul. Ham yelled, "Hey!" Raoul was about to go home to rest, when he heard Ham's voice. He turned around and agreed. "Ham, what's the matter?" Raoul came to Ham's side at a trot and asked suspiciously, "I'll go to the district chief's house later, you know the district chief's house." Ham said, looking at Raoul's sweaty forehead. "Hey. I know. I'll go as soon as I drink my saliva." Raoul nodded and responded hastily, "Hurry up, the district chief may have something to announce today. Don't be late, I'm leaving first, and someone else will notify you," Ham warned Raoul, then left. Raoul looked at Ham, who was slowly leaving, with envy and jealousy in his eyes. He had a stable job, and he was also a small official, with no worries about food and drink. "Jack, go to the district chief's house before eating. Don't forget, little ram, tell your father to go directly to the district chief's house for dinner." While walking, Ham saw the people under his command and shouted a few words. In less than 10 minutes, all the people had been notified, and when they went back to change a pair of shoes, Ham went to the district chief's house full of energy. At this time, a middle-aged man wearing a hat was sitting in front of the district chief's house, and behind him stood 3 young men in their 20s, well-behaved and somewhat reserved. Afterwards, Lemire walked in lightly, and bowed to the sitting middle-aged man. "Your Excellency, District Chief, I have already informed you, and..." "Got it." The middle-aged man nodded slightly and said slowly. Lemire then stood aside like the other 3 young people, looking around boredly. Rodney sat in a chair, thinking silently. As the owner of a grain shop, Rodney's reputation for generosity was passed down through the generation, and he was nicknamed Great Rodney after inheriting the grain store from his father. Rodney made bread from moldy and sprouted grains to some poor people from time to time, and sometimes invited people to drink a glass of rye wine in the tavern. Compared with other stingy businessmen, Rodney was generous. These things have brought him a great reputation and made him extremely influential in this generation. It can be said that in a few years, he will be able to go to the city council and become the envy of everyone. But there was an unexpected situation. Starting this year, His Majesty the King actually cancelled the autonomy of London. More importantly, he actually promised the city councillors to serve for life. My God, after getting this news, Rodney got very drunk. His MP dreams were shattered. However, a few months later, things turned around. Because of his good reputation and influence, he was appointed by the mayor as the head of this district. After learning the good news, he immediately used his right to name this 100 household district as Sweet 100 household district, and then handed over the name to the chief district chief. Finally, the city government recorded that this 100 household district, the residential area, has become the 100 household district of Sweet. This is the privilege of his first 100 household district chief. As the mayor of a district of 100 households, the city government paid him as much as £1, 240 pence, which was 1/3 of the profit of his grain store. Rodney still remembers his surprised expression when he first learned that he was still paid this morning. He was called by His Excellency the Chief District Chief, and together with 10 other district chiefs, he carried out the order of the city government to record the population. To be honest, when he learned of this order, he felt that the city government was simply full and had nothing to do, to have fun. There is no way, for the sake of his official position, it is nothing to be busy unknowingly. The door of Rodney's house was full of men, and the smell of sweat gathered together, creating a special smell. Smelling this smell, Rodney woke up from the memory, covered his nose, grimaced. He felt an urge to vomit. "Gin, Hal, Isaac, Lemire, the next task is entrusted to you. Don't let me down." Covering his nose, Rodney's voice changed a bit, and he gave orders to the 4 young men beside him. "I'm not feeling well. I'll go to rest first." Seeing the head of Rodney who ran away, the 4 of Lemire looked at each other helplessly. They could only shrug their shoulders, sighed, and started to work from the baskets on the ground. The 4 of Lemire took away a dozen or so small palm-sized red and white covers. The covers were thickened and seemed to be mixed with a piece of wood. The words "Hugh Cowbook" were written on them. There are red and white rose pictures painted around it, which looks beautiful and moving. Turn over the thickened cover. The first page is arranged in order from top to bottom: county, city, district, area code, owner, population. Turning to the second page, the head of the household, gender, age, date of birth, are listed in sequence. The rest of the pages are the same, except that they record family members. Does it look familiar to everyone? Isn't this a pirated version of the account book? The servants of His Excellency the District Mayor had already moved out 4 tables and chairs from home, and the 4 of them sat on them respectively. Although they didn't know what to do, the people were still ordering by Lemire to line up and start one by one. After hearing the orders from the 4 of Lemire, Ham consciously lined up in front of Lemire's table. Ranking first, Lemire looked up, then lowered his head, picked up the quill, and prepared to record as a clerk under the mayor of 100 households. He trained for 3 months before taking office, and he was able to know and write more than 3,000 words, barely passing the standard, of course. In English, are you the head of your household? Lemire asked without raising his head. Name. Ham answered honestly. How many people are there in the family? 5. My family gave me a daughter this year. Ham laughed. Chapter 198. Detailed data. In this way, after being busy for more than an hour, they finally figured out the situation of each family. All 4 of Lemire's hands were sore from writing, of course. The process was not smooth, and in Lemire's view, it was painful like birthdays. My God, how do these people remember their own and their family's birthdays? Some even couldn't remember their age clearly. Therefore, the 4 of Lemire had to ask the age first, and then help him calculate the year he was born in. As for the birthday, just find one at random. Today is very good, so almost everyone arranges their birthdays for today. Those men reported the birthdays of their wives and children on today, which is July 25th. Perhaps in their opinion, arranging birthdays on the same day may be convenient for celebrating and save a lot of money. Of course, it's not just them. Most of the people who log in on this day arrange their birthdays on this day. As for those who landed tomorrow, their birthday would be on July 26th. In addition to birthdays, Lemire and others even need to name their son or daughter, because the sons or daughters of these people don't have a name yet, and they can only have a name when they grow up, either following their fathers or their mothers. And if this is the case, won't the names of the registered accounts be the same? Therefore, the hard-working Lemire 4 had to think hard about names for the children of this group of people, but these bitter are very happy. They believed that the 4 of them were literate and educated, and the names they chose must be good, at least better than their own. As we all know, it is very difficult to come up with a name, both in China and abroad. So all kinds of Alan, Ed, Emma, etc. ran out in a row. Anyway, how convenient it was. And among the more than 100 people, the average of the 4 people is only more than 20 people, and it took more than an hour to be considered barely qualified. Oh, seeing the crowd slowly disperse and it was getting dark, Gene stretched his waist and showed a relaxed expression. My God, I'm so exhausted. Who would have thought that they are so stupid? Gene said with a look of contempt. That's right. Just now, there was another person who didn't even know how many people he had in his family. I was almost exhausted. Hal, who had some pimples on his face, also nodded in agreement, with a disgusted expression on his face. I don't even have the mood to talk now, I'm too tired. Isaac said slowly, throwing himself on the table, as if he had exhausted all his strength to say this. Okay, let's go report to the district chief. I just miss my bed and delicious bread now. Lemire glanced at the 3 of them and reminded them tiredly. He felt his throat was about to smoke. Yes, let's return to our mission as soon as possible, and then go home to sleep. Gene suddenly realized, and said hastily so. The 4 of them tidied up quickly and walked into the house of the district chief. As for those chairs and tables, there are servants to clean up, of course, which they don't know how to do. Dong dong dong. Hal took the lead and knocked on the door of the room. Come in. The district chief's voice came from inside. Your Excellency, District Chief, we have registered everyone in the district, so we can go back. Seeing the district chief gnawing on the chicken leg, Hal swallowed, and then asked softly, okay, you guys go back. Rodney glanced at the neatly arranged household registration books in the basket, and nodded with satisfaction. Only then did the 4 of them show joy, and when they were about to turn around and leave, the voice of the district chief came from behind Lemire. Come to my house tomorrow, take these to the chief district chief, and then follow him to the city hall. Hearing this voice, the 4 of them stopped in unison. Lemire turned around with a hint of joy at the corner of his mouth, and bowed to Rodney to salute. Follow your instructions, Your Excellency the district chief. The other 3 cast envious glances at him. Going to the head of the district not only gives you a sense of presence in front of him, but you also have the opportunity to go to the city hall together, and you must know a lot of people along the way. Rodney nodded to Lemire, with a flash of appreciation in his eyes for Lemire. Rodney's initial impression was that this young man was polite and not bad. At least better than the other 3, so I usually assign some tasks to him. and he has completed them well, which makes the impression even better. Rodney is satisfied with Lemire. What's more, his term of office as district chief is only 4 years. No matter whether he is promoted or dismissed after 4 years, there must be people from him in this district. After all, this is the place where he lives, and he is optimistic about Lemire. The next day, when Lemire came to Rodney's house, a servant had already carried a sack and was waiting for him. After that, he came to the district chief. When he came here, 5 or 6 people were already there. Of course, like him, they are all clerks, and none of the district chiefs came by themselves. He couldn't waste this opportunity to expand his network. With his willingness to make friends, and the fact that he and others are also willing, he got to know all the other people here, not seeking deep feelings, but just familiarity. And when the officers from the 12 districts arrived, the district chief didn't come out to meet them, but one of his officers came out to greet them and took them to the city hall with a kind face. A group of people came to the railway carriage station sign and waited for the arrival of the carriage. In order to save money, the servants went back on their own. After all, a penny is money. In less than 10 minutes, the carriage stopped. Fortunately, there was no one in the carriage. Except for the 4 seats in the VIP compartment, the other 9 people were in the ordinary compartment. Of course, Lemire, who was not wealthy, didn't sit in the VIP box, and sat in the ordinary box consciously. Fortunately, there were 8 people accompanying him, so he didn't care much about face. Half an hour later, 13 people got off the overcrowded carriage. The people in the ordinary compartment were sweating profusely, while the people in the VIP compartment were neatly dressed and looked much more refreshed. Lemire saw this and firmly believed in his heart, I must have my own private carriage when I travel in the future. After everyone got out of the car, the white city government building appeared in front of their eyes. What was even more eye-catching was that there was a long queue in front of the building, and everyone had a sack in their hands. There is no doubt that these people and they are the same. There are 264 100 household districts and 22 1,000 household districts in and around London, so there are at least 200 people in front of the city hall. In this way, after a week of calculation and statistics, the population living in and outside the City of London already has more detailed data, instead of rough statistics like last time. In this regard, Mayor William went to Whitehall Palace early in the morning to personally report to His Majesty the King. Chapter 199 My London. After tidying up his clothes, Mayor William smiled and walked into Whitehall Palace with his head held high. In this regard, the guards already knew him, and let him go directly. Turning a blind eye on the way, a maid automatically came to him and led the way slowly. He has already made an appointment with His Majesty the King in advance for this meeting, so there is no need to report this time. Someone will take him to meet His Majesty the King directly. At the beginning, Edward didn't think of setting up an appointment. After all, there were not many things in England, and the Privy Council would naturally deal with ordinary matters. He seemed very leisurely. However, since he returned from Scotland, after several months of adjustments, the new central system can operate normally, so he has been busy. Judiciary, military affairs, and finance, which used to be the work of the Privy Council, are now handled by him. Although it is not too busy, there are still a lot in general. In order to ensure his private time, he had to set up a secretariat. At present, the job of the secretariat is to help him arrange his daily affairs, including things to be dealt with or people to meet. At that time, he was still a note-taking function, which could remind him to do the planned things. The candidates for the secretariat are very important. The first is to be loyal. After all, the secretariat is the person closest to him and the one who understands his thoughts best. If someone informs the enemy country, the loss will be huge. The second is to be literate. That's right, in this age of low literacy, it's very rare to find a literate person. The third is appearance. After all, it is a person who has to face all day long, so it is easy to make people sick if they are ugly. To sum it up, Edward found that Emma, the personal bodyguard, was very suitable. First of all, they were adopted by Edward and brainwashed. Their loyalty ranks at the forefront in the whole of England, and after several years of training, their literacy level is enough to exceed the 9th level of people in England. Besides, none of them are ugly, and they are quite eye-catching, which is the most suitable. It was such a happy decision. Walking up the steps and coming to the waiting hall, Mayor William glanced at the gorgeous hall, where there were still several people sitting on the chairs. And they didn't care about his arrival at all. They all lowered their heads, thinking silently. Seeing that these people in front of him were all unfamiliar faces, William didn't care, but one of them gave him a gloomy and intimidating feeling, which made his eyelids twitch unconsciously, and it seemed that his gaze stayed for a long time. It seemed that the man noticed his gaze, then raised his head, nodded and smiled at Mayor William, and then lowered his head again, Immersing himself in his own world, Mayor William also nodded with a smile on his face, found a seat, and sat down, consciously ignoring him. I began to think about how to have a dialogue with His Majesty the King. After a while, a handsome girl with a slender waist came over, glanced over, saw Mayor William sitting there, and walked over. "Your Excellency, Mayor." The girl lowered her head to remind William. "Oh." Mayor William woke up, then raised his head and saw the secretary in front of him. "Your Majesty the King invites you to enter," the female secretary continued with a smile as if she was used to it. Then Mayor William nodded, then looked at his appearance and clothing, and then followed the female secretary into the room. "Good day, Your Majesty." When Mayor William saw His Majesty the King sitting on the chair, he immediately bowed and saluted respectfully and sincerely. "Get up. Mr. Mayor, I hope you can let me know the real face of London this time. Not a rough estimate." Edward raised his hand and said directly, but at this time, the female secretary walked out of the room, closed the door, and stood guard at the door. "Your Majesty, after our month-long efforts this time, we have made a detailed statistics of the specific situation in London." Mayor William didn't feel embarrassed, and said without delay, "After calculation, there are 30,053 households in the 22,000 household districts in London, and the resident population has reached 183,526 people. Moreover, due to the increasing prosperity of London's business, in London the living population is still increasing, and it is conservatively estimated that by the end of this year, the population of London will reach 185,000 people." The population here refers to the population living in London, that is, the population who owns a house in London. If you add some houseless beggars, there are nearly 190,000 people living in London as of June 25. London has 5,650 shops, 153 taverns, 295 large and small factories, 136 large and small wharves, shipyards and repair shops. 13. Mayor William paused, took a breath and continued. "Due to the establishment of the 100,000 household districts, the current number of employees in the entire London city government has reached 5,116. Among them, there are a total of 4,180 employees in the 100 household district and the 1,000 household district. The London city government has 936 employees, of which 300 are urban management, 300 are from the Metropolitan Police Department, and the rest are employees of all departments." Edward heard this and nodded. The reason why the number of police officers did not reach 500, as mentioned above, is that Edward forgot that the sheriffs in the 100 and 1,000 household districts also have police officers. If calculated in this way, the number of police officers in the entire London has reached 1,600, which is enough law and order in London. The sheriff of the 100 house district and the 100 house district are directly under the police department. The sheriff of the 100 house district is appointed by the director and the mayor, and the magistrate of the 1,000 house district is appointed by the king. The same is true for tax officials. Those in the 100 household district are appointed by the finance department and the mayor, while those in the 1,000 household district are appointed by the king. The importance of the capital is self-evident. In this way, the entire London is controlled at various levels, basically under Edward's control. It can be said that London at this time is really in the hands of Edward. Currently, London's fiscal revenue has reached £30,000 per month. After paying it to the Treasury, the remaining £9,000 will be used to pay a salary of £2,000. The rest will be used for urban construction and various subsidies. Mayor William introduced to Edward the specific situation in London. Even the financial expenditure, £2,000 for salary, doesn't seem like much, but this is in London, and if it's in the county, it's basically equivalent to most of the financial expenditure. Not bad, my Mr. Mayor. Edward nodded slightly, expressing his approval. However, Edward stared into His Excellency the Mayor's eyes. "I hope that the financial revenue will be more. After all, the central government also has a lot of expenses. I will do my best." Mayor William looked at the king's dark blue eyes, bit his lips, and assured in a deep voice. Chapter 200 Palace Intelligence Department. Under pressure, Mayor William slowly exited the room, closed the door gently, and nodded to the secretary at the door, His Majesty's personal secretary. "You can't offend him." After seeing him coming out, the gloomy-looking man suddenly stood up, walked slowly to the door, and bowed to the female secretary. "Miss Emma, it's my turn now." The man smiled. "Yes, Mr. Ham. Please come in." Emma smiled slightly. She liked this kind of compliment very much, opened the door, and made a gesture of "please, thank you." Guy Ham nodded to her, and took a special look at Mayor William before going in, which made Mayor William feel baffled. Mayor William nodded politely to Emma and said goodbye. He would not compliment a secretary like the person just now, even if she is the secretary of His Majesty the King. This is the dignity of a mayor stepping on the floor of the palace step by step. Mayor William was thinking about the information about that person just now, and his brain kept reminding him that this was a familiar name. Guy Ham. Guy Ham. William murmured the name, and the more he said it, the brighter his eyes became. I remembered, this is the leader of the spy agency in the hands of His Majesty the King. Suddenly, Mayor William recalled the night when the Earl of Warwick escaped, and Guy Ham made a lot of limelight. Good day, Your Majesty. As soon as Guy came in, he saw Edward sitting on a chair, staring at him, and immediately bowed to salute. If Mayor William's degree is 30 degrees, he is 60 degrees. You did a good job with that thing a few days ago. Edward praised kindly, looking at the leader of the Dark Blade with satisfaction in his eyes. Guy couldn't help but be overjoyed by this. His Majesty's satisfaction is the greatest affirmation of his work. All of this is God's blessing and His Majesty's blessing. What I have done is nothing. Guy will not be complacent. He is a close minister of the King. Fame and wealth are all in the King's words, and it is very important to have a good relationship with His Majesty the King. Looking at Guy Ham with short hair in front of him, Edward had to lament that time flies. 2 years ago, in February, he had just inherited the throne, and he was only 10 years old. At that time, Guy still had long black and greasy hair, and had a mighty-looking body, but his physique had been lacking. Looking at it now, Guy's body also swelled up like a balloon, looking mighty and majestic, and he was also wearing the high-grade linen clothes worn by low-level nobles and gentlemen. From a distance, he looked like a knight. Ham, do you know the reason why I called you here this time? Edward glanced at Guy Ham's cheek with a new scar on it, and said in a calm tone this. Guy looked puzzled, with the 3 words I don't know written on his face. You have been with me for 2 years, but you have always been a commander. Don't you complain? Edward changed his voice and mentioned his position. It's my honor to be able to serve His Majesty. How can I complain? Hearing this sentence, Guy explained quickly, fearing that Edward might misunderstand. You are so, but can you guarantee that none of your subordinates complained? Looking at Guy's blue eyes, Edward asked back. When Edward asked, Guy was speechless. In fact, he had heard a lot of complaints from his subordinates, which was true at present. The people in Dark Blade are all impetuous. Without the passion at the beginning, most people are just dawdling. Originally, most people join the Dark Blade to become knights. However, the meritorious service plan established by Edward is too perverted. In the past 2 years, he has personally issued only 5 missions. How many years? Not even himself a knight. In fact, Edward also realized that he had taken the point system for granted. He wondered why there hadn't been any knights born in Dark Blade after 2 years. It was only later that I realized that it was my own problem, and there were too few tasks issued. But I can't blame him for this. There are not many important things, so I can't do the task. As soon as Edward noticed this, he immediately decided to reform the Dark Blade. Guy, it's been 2 years, and the Dark Blade system needs to be changed. Edward stood up from his chair, walked in front of Guy, and said earnestly, Your Majesty is wise. Guy Ham obeys your arrangement. Guy said without hesitation as soon as he heard about the reform, adhering to the request of being loyal to His Majesty the King. Seeing Guy Ham's such a smart performance, Edward felt a little emotional at the moment. I am so relieved. So, in the next half an hour, Edward made some adjustments to the Dark Blade. First of all, the name Dark Blade was changed. Many book friends said that it was too anime-like and had to be changed. After some careful consideration by the great king, the Dark Blade was changed to the Blood Blade, and its main duty was to inquire about news or perform some tasks to obtain information about the enemy country. Edward has also considered such an arrangement. First of all, most of Dark Blade's original troops are the down-and-out children of some dilapidated country gentry and low-ranking nobles. This is doomed. It is always translucent, for the nobles and gentlemen of England. Therefore, its function was arranged by Edward as a news library, focusing on foreign countries, and of course, domestic ones would also take care of it. The incentive rules remain unchanged. After all, it is difficult to become a knight, and these talents will cherish it. But Edward was more flexible. The points are no longer only used to exchange for knights, but can be exchanged for money, houses, and land. In this way, although the knights are still out of reach, the points will get a lot of good things, greatly improving their morale. After Dark Blade, Edward decided to set up another spy organization, focusing on the country, nobles, gentlemen and officials in England, Scotland, Wales, and even Ireland, and of course the army, as well as individuals who are not good for the king or threaten the king's power or organize monitoring. Their duty is to protect the crown, monitor and eliminate opponents. Edward merited a nice name. Palace Intelligence Service. The personnel selected some people with civilian backgrounds from the Dark Blade, and orphans trained in the Dark Blade, and selected some people who could use torture from the Star Chamber Court to form this new intelligence agency. It fit in with Edward's vision of an intelligence agency, truly serving him alone. As for the new Blood Blade, Guy was finally appointed as the leader, no longer the commander. As for the head of another new court intelligence service, Edward had a candidate. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.